Lex Luthor studies a dying universe and decides to step sideways into one where even gods bleed. He calculates a path, stolen mother box, negative speed force arithmetic, Felix Faust's ninefold warding, Sinestro's fear prism as stabilizer, Black Manta's abyssal reactor for push. He tells the others this new galaxy runs on belief and oil and death, and he intends to be the accountant. They agree because each one wants a world where their vices are virtues. The Ouroboros gate bites its own tail, and the breach yawns open over Vigulus, and the debt counters start to tick. Night on Vigulus is the color of furnace breath. Hive Mega Borealis shudders with promedium trains and thunderhead vox. Sirens thread the fog like knives. A comet of green-yellow fear light punches the cloud deck, dragging a ringed wound in the sky. Sinestro descends first, a spear point of will carving a re-entry corridor. The fear construct forms a heat shield shaped like a screaming angel. He likes how the locals will read it. Behind him, Reverse Flash blurs into a red arc that stitches thunder into a seam. Black Manta falls in a controlled dive, jets hissing, visor painting the city with sonar glyphs. Luthor rides a slab of matte black armor plating extruded by drones, coat whipping, eyes on telemetry. Faust chants within a ring of glyphs that float like ember moths. Chalk that never smudges, blood that never dries. Cheetah paces the air on hooked constructs. Deathstroke stands calm. Boots magnetized, rifle already at 600 meters. Gorilla Grodd crouches on a lattice of lattices, mind brushing a million panicked sparks below. The gate closes behind them with a sound like a judge's gavel. The sky ripples. Luthor checks the ledger in his HUD. Mass energy transfer balanced, entropy deficit noted. A tiny yellowed Polaroid in his mind, the first time he saw a meteor with his father, flakes away like ash, and he does not notice the hole. On the surface, Vigulus roars. Macro cannons on the Bastion line hammer something in the dark. Auspex towers bracket the newcomers with hostile tags. Vox traffic spikes. Bin Harik cant. Gothic prayers. Steel nerves under stress. The city's bones hum with rail lines and the sub-oceanic coolant rivers under the Manufactoria. They arrive in the air above a collapsing transit spire. A hive-level tram knuckle shears, and 200 workers tumble into a vacuum of fire and wind. Sinestro's ring blossoms. A net of fear, not comforting but undeniable, manifests as interlocking Gothic ribs and cathedral glass. He saves them by making them look at their terror and step onto it. Reverse Flash pulses through the tumble like a stitcher's needle, sweeping bodies into pockets where gravity is only as strong as his contempt. Cheetah dives, catching cables in claws and turning the fall into arcs. She laughs once, short and feral, when steel obeys her angles. Black Manta deploys foam charges that harden like ice, sealing ruptures, redirecting flame. Faust anchors a warded circle mid-air and speaks 3 names that coins cannot buy. The screaming thermal currents lose interest in flesh and coil into serpent knots that eat themselves. Grodd spreads his mind like a tarp over the panic, a blanket of suggestion. Breathe, obey, hold. Deathstroke fires 4 shots, and 4 lines of cable snap free to create a weighted bridge that flexes to the tune he chooses. Luthor does math. The spire's center of mass is wrong by 7 seconds and 2 tons. He sends his drones to drink heat and vomit ballast. He opens a line on an unknown Vox protocol, piggybacks a hymn, and overlays his commands as music. 1,000 machine spirits hear a foreign conductor and, grudgingly, keep time. Bodies thud onto Sinestro's stained glass platform. The contrition doesn't matter, the result does. Grodd eases the pressure off minds and catches a stray prayer. Emperor protect. He files the cadence away. Fear needs a spine to wrap around. On a Bastion balcony, Acadian officer watches through a cracked rangefinder. His armor bears old white paint and new black scorch. He lifts a Vox bead with the steady hands of a man who has seen Titans die and still respects checklists. This is Lord Commander Lucerne Holt, Acadian Remnant, Vigilus Defense Cohort, he says. Identify. Luthor keeps the line clean and respectful. We are an intervention force from a neighbor realm, he says. Voice metallic, warm at the edges. We've saved 204 of your citizens. We request a meeting to coordinate defense. We can pay our way. Another line opens, colder. Inquisitor Amaranth Vey, Ordo Hereticus, a woman says, voice like polished glass. Witnessed, warp breach. Witnessed, Xenos tech, witchcraft, unknown constructs. Prepare for boarding and sanctification. Move, and you are cut from sky. Sinestro glances at Luthor, amusement precise as a blade's edge. Reverse Flash is already a smear again, mapping kill boxes, teasing Auspex with decoy echoes. Black Manta marks the range on macro cannons. His finger is steady, his patience absolute. Cheetah licks blood off a claw, not sure whose. Understood, Luthor says. Board us. We do not kneel, but we will listen. A black thunderhead crosses the city. From it, a spear of midnight falls. A dropship armored like a reliquary, aquila blazing, engines singing litanies. It slams onto a landing plate conjured by Sinestro, finds purchase it does not believe in, and disgorges knights. Black Templars, tabards that learned war from fire, chains that hold weapons as if binding them to oaths. A marshal steps out, helm on, eyes like lamps under the visor. He carries a relic blade that remembers saints. Names, he says, voice amplified into a church. Luthor, Lex says. Sinestro, Manta, Thorny, Priscilla, Wilson, Grodd, Faust. He lets his own armor plates ratchet into a silhouette they will understand. Knightly and angular. No cape. An Aquila-shaped absence where a logo might be. He gestures to the rescued line on the hovering platform. We came to add, not subtract. The marshal's auto-senses drink the scene. Warp residue, fear spectrum emissions, anomalous time shear, citizens alive. Blasphemy, he says evenly. Ineffective service. He raises 2 fingers. Bolters settle a fraction lower. We will bind you in words, not chains, until chains are needed. Inquisitor Vey arrives like the second clause of an execution order. Her rosette is an iron sun. Her retinue forms a boundary. Sisters of the Adepta Sororitas in white-trimmed armor. Stormbolters quiet and decisive. Acolytes with sensors that breathe blue smoke like cold forgiveness. She looks at Luthor as if measuring a triangle she does not trust. You will submit to sanction, unknowns, Vey says. Any hope of parley dies if any of you touch the warp again without my leave. Faust smiles with too many teeth. Then speak quickly, Inquisitor, he purrs. The warp is the weather here. Faust, Luthor says without looking. One word like a leash. Then to Vey. We will accept leash parameters while we assist. But we bring knowledge of an enemy that will leverage your saints into ashes. Threat, Vey asks. Promise, Luthor replies. An impact tremor slams through the hive. Sirens recalcitrant and raw. On far horizons, something like a city-sized bell tolls from underground. Holt's Vox operators begin to shout over one another. Drakari raiders on the north lattice, orc scrap walkers in the east sump. Then a new voice cuts the stack, oily and exalted. Vigilus, it says. Vox and demon moan interleaved. You have been chosen to host a crown. The cloud deck splits into 9 points of uncolor. Chains of lightning made from scripture pour down and burn themselves into a warding circle on the far industrial desert. The air tastes like pennies and betrayal. On the plain outside the hive, monoliths of black stone punch up and lean like broken teeth toward a point that is not here. Noctilith. Vey swears without moving her mouth. Holt whispers, crown, as if the word is a knife. Luthor inhales slow. They're building a gate, he says, not missing the bitter humor. Our arrival has made them bold. It will focus their superstitions into a weapon. The word bearers march from a rent in the world, scripture carved into armor, red and black and silver. Dark apostles raise crozi that drink light. Their mortal flock swarms around them in robes that were once clean. The Black Legion answers the bell with iron discipline, black and gold, eyes glowing like furnace ports. Obliterators slump walk, guns growing like tumors. Demon engines skitter like felled spiders. A scarlet angel manifests above the nascent crown, wings of meat on fire, mouth a choir of mouths that sing one note of contempt. It looks at the hive with lust. It looks at the newcomers with interest. Your gate pulled a thread, Vey says. The tapestry noticed. I noticed first, Luthor says, and his voice does not tremble. Sinestro drifts forward, ring painting tactical arcs. Their fear is structured, he murmurs. Religious fear is efficient. It vectorizes. Translation, Holt says tightly. They're ready to die in a shape that hurts you, Sinestro says. Marshal Raban of the Black Templars lifts his relic blade and points at the plain. We cut that shape apart, he says. We shatter the crown before it is crowned. Concur, Luthor says. But your counter battery is fixed. Their locus is mobile. They will float the Noctilith geometry on pain and probability, and your shells will chase ghosts. Reverse Flash grins at the map only he can see. I can make their time trip, he says, but I'll throw up in my mask in the process. Better than bleeding out of your ears, Cheetah says. Positions, Vey says. Proposals. Luthor projects a plan in light that pretends to be fire, so it speaks both languages at once. We need 3 prongs, he says. A doctrinal assault to pin them, your crusaders and sisters. A surgical strike to sever their apostle. Deathstroke, Cheetah, Grodd as jammer. A counter-ritual to steal the crown's middle while it grows. Faust, Sinestro, myself. Manta runs interdiction on their demon engines. Thorn runs harassment lanes and collapses any temporal tautness they pull. Commander Holt, you shift your macro cannons to fire on coordinates I will feed that will look wrong. They will be right. Who commands? Vey asks. When voices contradict. We do not contradict, Marshal Raban says. And the Templars thunder approval that is not volume but density. He turns to Luthor. We will not kneel to sorcerers. You don't have to, Luthor says simply. You only have to win. Vey studies him, eyes narrowed, nostrils scenting sin. You owe this world a debt already, she says. Your machine tore a hole. It was a hole waiting for a thumb, Luthor answers. I will pay, with interest. Start by letting me be your bad idea. We chain the bad idea to the Holy One, Raban says, and holds up his blade. A Templar chaplain steps forward, croziers crackling. Oaths, the Marshal says. Sinestro's lip curls. I do not. Luthor raises a hand. We swear operational fealty to the defense of Vigilus for the term of this engagement, he says. We accept sanction for breach. We defer to the Inquisition on matters of ritual contamination. We reserve the right to self-defense. Vey turns the rosette once, slowly, as if winding a clock. Sanctioned, she says. Fail me, and there will be no you left to fail. Faust bows with theatrical precision. I adore a strong partner, he says. Holt cuts in, crisp. First wave of traitors in 10 minutes. Macro cannons retasked to coordinates that make my teeth itch. He glances at Luthor. If this costs me guns when I need them, I'll personally throw you into a reactor. Noted, Luthor says. He glances at his HUD. Another brown-edged photograph curls in his mind. Somebody's handwriting in the margins of a book he once loved, and flakes away. He still does not notice. They move. Sinestro opens a corridor through flak and prayer, a tunnel of glass and will that lets dropships burst forward without turbulence. Templars ride the line like arrowheads. Sororitas hymnals cut the vox, the words small and bright and precise. Faith as drill, devotion as logistics. Manta slashes low, foam bombing the legs of a scorpion-shaped demon engine, then plants a shaped charge under its throat. The detonation is clean and disgusted. Reverse flash explodes the battlefield into snapshots. He taps a raptor's jump pack at the instant of fuel starve. The pack flares early, and the traitor slams into a tower, leaving an angry smear. He steals a second from a word-bearer's reload and does not return it. He loses count of the times he has to blink tears from broken vessels out of his eyes. Grodd leans into the mortal tide. He does not command. He suggests obedience to safety. Peasants with knives step back from an edge of a pit that was not there yesterday. Cultists hear a father's voice say sleep and sleep, with their throats bare to the ground, dreaming of fields that never existed. He does not enjoy the taste. Deathstroke goes to work the way a surgeon resigns himself to blood. He becomes the answer to a block diagram. Isolate the voice, sever the relay, drop the standard. He cuts a vox tether with a shot that sounds like glass breaking in a winter house. He counts his heartbeats and finds them the same number they were in a different life. Cheetah moves like she already knows all the edges. She runs along the spine of her obliterator as it reconfigures, then tears its eye out with a hand that weighs less than the scream she is making. She does not pray. She edits. Faust steps into the negative geometry of the Noctilith crown, as one who reads music steps into a cathedral at noon to check the echoes. He smirks at the Dark Apostle's warding circle. He steps on it, though it is not a thing for feet, and leaves a print that burns the wrong color. Sinestro's ring amplifies the force chord and throws it back with all the discipline of a boot camp. Luthor stands in the open, trusting math to be its own armor. He angles drones to project interference patterns on reality itself, cancelling the line noise of prayer by feeding it measured blasphemy. He notes where the crown wants to be and writes a counterwant in numbers only a few machines and 9 demons can read. The Dark Apostle sees him. The crozier swings like a pendulum of a clock that tells hate. The Apostle's mouth tells a parable about obedience that even the air kneels for. The Scarlet Angel above the crown turns its head and smiles in meat. Sororitas bolters jerk into drumbeat. Black Templars crash into black and red with the noise of anvils that forgot compromise. The world blurs into particles of courage and terror. A sister plants her banner in a storm of scripture and does not move again, but the cloth keeps moving because the wind wants to live. Luthor, Sinestro, and Faust lay their triangulation. The crown shudders. Reverse Flash vomits into his mask, rips it off, and smiles at how much worse it could be. Cheetah cuts the chain of a chanting circle, and the chant keeps going, because the dead do not need lungs. The Scarlet Angel drops a wingtip to stir wind. It inhales all the prayers and exhales knives. A Templar takes 3 in the visor, and the sparks look like holy coins in dirty water. The angel leans to look at Lex, curious. Noted, Luthor says quietly. Black Manta hooks the angel's shadow with a grapnel that has no physical analog here. His visor paints a map of heat and absence. He drags the shadow into a heat duct and floods it with cryofoam. The angel's wing freezes along an edge it did not know it had. It shrieks, as if it has just been named. Faust laughs like he just got away with something outrageous. Sinestro bares teeth that do not comfort. Luthor allows himself one nod. Push, Marshal Raban orders. Drive the heretics from their geometry. They push. The Dark Apostle's voice cuts and cuts the world, but it cannot cut all directions at once. Deathstroke's shot arrives without a story the Apostle can read, and his Crozius falters a heartbeat. Grodd pours a wall of silence into a spear of thought, and wedges it between the Apostle and his God. Templars fall. Sisters kneel and stand and kneel, because standing forever is not written for flesh. Holt's macro cannons thunder on the coordinates that itch at his teeth, and the shells burst in the air where nothing is. And yet the crown's corners chip. The angel opens its mouth, and a mouth within it speaks a word that means start over. The world wobbles. Reverse Flash catches the wobble and skates it like a kid who took a dare and discovered a talent for it. He leans the wobble into a ditch and lets it run out harmlessly in a patch of field that will never grow anything again. On your left, Cheetah says to Deathstroke, and is gone before he turns. Inquisitor, a Sororitas Vox sister says in Vay's ear. The crown, its aspect is changing. Vay watches, eyes narrowed against incense smoke and grit. The geometry wavers. Faust rubs his hands as if warming them at a fire only he can feel. Sinestro's ring pulses, fear reflecting fear until the mirror cracks. Luthor steps forward and puts his hand into air that shouldn't be touched. He threads his fingers through two angry lines on a graph no one else can see and ties them into a knot. He ties the knot to a promise he made when he was young and cruel and right. The promise is still true. The noctilith crown groans, tips, and sinks a degree toward a geometry that is wrong for it. The Dark Apostle's Vox prayer fractures. The choir of mortals gulps a breath at the wrong time and loses their place. The crown is a cathedral whose weight is now on the wrong stones. Now, Vay says, burn them. The Holy Trinity of heavy bolters, melter, and flamer speaks a language everyone understands at the end. The heretics swell shreds. Obliterators melt into the promise of future guns they will not keep. The Scarlet Angel flings itself upward in a rage that looks like a retreat. The crown does not fall. It sulks. It waits another song. First victory, Holt says into his bead, daring hope into the open as if it is bait. On my oath, first victory. Bodies steam in the night. The air tastes like pennies and triumph. Templars walk the lines double-checking dead, checking for twitch, delivering the rare mercy that this cosmos allows. Sinestro lands beside Luthor, ring dimmer. Structured fear, he says. Efficient. Structured hope. Luthor answers, surprising himself with how the words feel in his mouth. Dangerous. Grodd lifts his head. 100,000 minds whisper at him like wind under a door. Gratitude, suspicion, awe twisted into duty. A child simple, thank you. He keeps none of it. Inquisitor Vay approaches like a verdict that was drafted before the first witness spoke. Temporary success, she says, and a mess of precedent. Luthor nods. I prefer precedent to confession, he says. Marshal Raban cleans his blade on scripture. You stood when the Emperor required standing, he says, almost grudging. You will see a chapel. Holt lets the hand that holds his bead drop. He looks older in victory. We'll need to move before dawn, he says. They don't play for single engagements. They're laying something bigger. And we have orc movement. And there's a whisper about Eldar knives on the south rail. Everyone wants a piece of a crown, Cheetah says, stretching, blood drying on her fur in lines that look ceremonial. Faust hums a chord that makes candles sway. The crown is a lens, he says, admiring the audacity, and lenses invite eyes. Vay picks a piece of black crystal from the ash with tongs. It sings in her bones. She stows it in a lead reliquary with a machine spirit too old to resent the job. You will not approach this material without me, she says. You will not approach anything without me. You are a gate wearing faces. Luthor tips his head. If I were a gate, he says softly, I would be a lock. Rabban snorts. Phrases, he says. Save them for saints. On the horizon, the place where the angel breath does not heal. Holt does not look at it for long. He looks at his men instead. He looks at the strangers again. He decides that for now, he has fewer problems with them than without them. The city exhales. Codex note, Noctilit, Blackstone, distorts and absorbs warp energies. A crown array can focus or redirect ritual vectors, but misaligned facets produce dangerous harmonic feedback that punishes sloppy sorcery. As the fires settle into circles of light, the War Council convenes in a manufactorum-turned-chapel. Machine pulpits hiss incense. Servo skulls stare like patient crows. A cogitator choir thrums a soft background computation, the logic equivalent of a lullaby. Holt stands with a map stamped in oil on the floor. They retreated to a secondary locus east here, he says. Boot toe in a square that used to be a warehouse for turbine blades. They'll try to finish the crown by dawn. Word-bearers do not sleep when their preachers are up. Rabban plants his blade again. The gesture writes the room's grammar. We hit them before they kneel, he says. We do not allow prayer to warm. Faye folds her hands like folded knives. We need intelligence on the shape of their ritual, she says. And I need to know how to aim you, she nods at Luthor, so that you lessen warp tension rather than playing at being clever. Holt looks at the strangers. You saved my people, he says. You saved enough that some families have more than numbers to count. That buys you latitude, not trust. Luthor accepts the scale. We want outcomes, he says. I assume you do too. We want souls saved and the Emperor obeyed, Faye says, which is also an outcome. Sinestro leans on his ring's light as if it is solid. It is. Your ideology is concentrated, he says. Impressive yield. Cheetah prowls the perimeter of the chamber, eyes never still. Deathstroke cleans his rifle with motions that ignore the room, which means he is noticing everything. Grodd listens to the city hum. He hears pockets of fear that have congealed into knives, and he notes where to avoid them if he wants to keep this alliance. He does not plan to avoid them. He plans to demonstrate. Faust fidgets with a bone counter that clicks like small teeth. The crown's new locus will be less elegant, he says. They are improvising. We punish their script. Now we see if they can think outside it. Word-bearers can. Black Legion certainly can. They will call friends, Holt says. We have orc dust in the east sump. The greenskins will smell a fight and label it dinner. And someone pinged a Xanos knife edge in the south. Eldar, they never arrived to help. Rabban growls through a vox filter. Eldar die like men, he says. Bay does not smile. Eldar die like ideas, she says. They take longer. Luthor taps the map with the toe of his boot, matching their ritual site to his ledger's debt. Each action here pushes on his numbers there. He can feel the hunger of the Ouroboros gate in a way that is not hunger. He wonders what he has already paid and hates that he cares. He files the hate. It is a tool. Holt points at a cluster of hab stacks. These are non-combatant housing for manufactorum families, he says. The heretics will cut through them to make distance and terror. We can't simply drop shells and be done with it. Then we use precision, Deathstroke says. He looks at Luthor because he knows Luthor will always choose knives over hammers when the hammers are not his. We also use spectacle, Sinestro says. Fear that bends theirs. Fear that writes new lines. Cheetah smirks. Make them fear the wrong thing. Make them fear themselves, Grodd says, which is not a suggestion, but he lets it sound like one. Bay's gaze sharpens. No mass enthrallments, she says. I can smell when minds are washed. I will burn the cloth. Grodd keeps his teeth together. Understood, he says. It is, in a way. It is also a lie he plans to keep only if it helps. Holt breathes out through his nose. I'll reroute a grenade company to the second-level servitor duct, he says. But someone has to hold the east sump wall. It's made of unhelpful decisions by my predecessors. Black Manta, Luthor says. That wall will not be made of unhelpful decisions for long. I like talking to infrastructure, Manta replies, visor hiding everything, voice hiding nothing. Raban points at the words Epsilon Rail on the map. We lock this, he says. We will not have knives in our ribs from elegant ghosts. Vey nods once. Agreed. I will have my sisters take the rail. Their prayers are heavy enough to sit on a track and make a train rethink momentum. Luthor draws a breath like a man who chooses oxygen. We go in 3 teams again. Raban and Vey anchor. Holt feeds non-intuitive targets. Sinestro and I will bend the crown's angles. Faust will behave. Faust bows with theatrical compliance. I will not educate your enemies unless I can charge tuition. Holt barks a laugh, sudden and surprised at itself. It dies quickly. Dawn in 3 hours, he says. That's how long your plans have to be alive. Luthor nods. He does not sleep. He runs scenarios until the numbers flatten into a problem he knows how to hate. Later, in a side chapel that smells of oil and old bread, Vey corners him. Her retinue ghosts out to form a ring that is a suggestion, not a trap. She studies his face, the way the light refuses to settle on his eyes. She has burned men for less. You are the door, she says quietly. Don't lie, the shape is too neat. I am the hinge, Luthor says, true enough to pass. There are worse doors. What does it cost you, Vey asks, to be clever here? Luthor pauses, long enough to feel it. Then he says a smaller truth that still fits inside the bigger lie. I forget, he says, and I do not know what yet. Vey studies the way his mouth hardly moved to make that sentence. You will tell me when you notice, she says. Because if you do not, I will notice for you, and I will not be kind. He inclines his head. You are not kind now, he says. Kindness is for the saved, she says. I am in logistics. An hour later, before the second push, Marshal Raban stands with his Templars in a machine nave where the cog altar hums and the fuser lamps make the air hum harder. He approaches Luthor with a blade sheathed in prayer. He taps the flat of it against Luthor's shoulder as if knighting a problem. You will not cross certain lines, he says. If you do, my blade is already in motion. The world is a line drawing, Luthor says. We choose where to ink. Raban's helm tilts. Gifts are also tests, he says. Do not mistake our tolerance for love. I never do, Luthor says. They move again. A machine of many arguments aligned by urgency. They step out under a sky that is thinking about bleeding. The wind carries orc laughter from the sump like a broken engine trying to turn over. At the rail, something invisible slices the air and leaves a taste like copper and old regret. The Eldar are here like a rumor with knives. Holt's cannons breathe. Vey's sisters sing as they take stairs 2 at a time. Templars make the ground honest by standing on it. Sinestro draws a corridor through a minefield with a line that says obey to explosives. Faust adjusts the crown without touching it, because sometimes touching admits too much intimacy. The second engagement opens like a book that already knows its last page. The word bearers return with more voices. The Black Legion returns with more guns. The Scarlet Angel does not return. Instead, a thing that looks like a mirror full of flies floats above the locus and eats light. Reverse Flash spits, sets his jaw, and runs into the place where a second is sick. Cheetah runs where edges are born. Deathstroke's shot arrives where prayers were supposed to make shots, not arrive. Grodd holds the line between suggestion and sin, with a hand that shakes like a man who knows his own limits and resents them. Manta holds the sum wall by convincing the water to be architecture. He does it with charges and braces and an argument in pressure that only water respects. He is very gentle with it, because he understands depth. Luthor watches all of it and counts, and somewhere in the counting, he forgets the smell of a workshop on a summer afternoon in a city that does not exist here. It is a small thing. It is not small. He winces, and then he stops himself, because the ledger is watching, and debts respect weakness like sharks do. He looks at the crown and sees a way to pull one tooth. He marshals fear, faith, foam, speed, bullets, and suggestion into a single chord, and with Sinestro and Faust, he plays a note that is not present in the word-bearer's hymn. It is not dissonance. It is a wrong memory. The crown tilts another degree. The flies in the mirror buzz in a new pattern that means, who taught you that? Vay's reliquary warms at her hip as if angry. Rabin's blade hums like a debate getting louder. They hold. They do not break the crown. They take ground they cannot afford. They set the table for a larger meal, one they might choke on. When the second night ends, the city has more exhausted heroes than corpses. That ratio is new. Holt writes it down as if writing makes it true again later. Vay writes down every sin and every provisional pardon, and her list looks like a prayer if you squint. Luthor stands on a gantry and watches the sun think about rising. He looks at a ledger only he can see. He feels a gap where a word should be, someone's name perhaps, and he hates it with the full weight of a genius's precision. He files the hate and calls it fuel. The Chimera convoy grinds into the chapel yard, loading wounded. A child looks up at Sinestro and smiles with professional courtesy. He has learned that fear is not always an enemy if it keeps him from jumping off a broken stair. Sinestro is honest enough with himself to approve of the pedagogy. Vay approaches again, this time with her helm under her arm, hair braided into discipline. "We will convene with other commanders," she says. "The enemy does not think this is the end, nor should we. We will need to move toward the crown's heart," Luthor says. "We are nibbling edges. They will not starve before we tire. We have a pilgrim's path," Rabin says. "We will carve our way and stand before the throne's will." Vay's eyes flicker with something like patience wrapped around steel. "We will go to the fortress world," she says. "We will seek mandate." Holt grimaces, but not in argument. "We need orders beyond ours," he says. "We're substituting cleverness for doctrine. That goes well until it goes extremely badly." Luthor nods. He knows when a board is about to vote. "Then we go ask your God what arithmetic he enjoys," he says. "He enjoys obedience," Vay says. "But he understands cost. We brought both," Luthor says. They break to prepare the voyage. Behind them, the crown scratches at air like a prisoner scratching a wall to hear if anyone is listening. Something does. The response is very far away and very close. In the city's lower levels, orc drums begin. In the quiet between beats, a whisper in a language that does not admit whispering slides along the rail. Elder knives are being sharpened on a future that dislikes being handled. The war is adjusting to the strangers. The strangers are adjusting to the war. Neither knows yet what it will cost both to reconcile. The sky thinks again about bleeding. The day arrives anyway. Night recedes from Viculus like a muscle unclenching. The crown holds, wounded. The city breathes through its vox masks and broken windows. Orders ripple. Move, resupply, pray, bleed, stand again. Holt sends chimeras to lift families out of the habstacks cut by the first clash. Sisters hold a corridor with hymn and muzzle flash. Templars kneel to reload like monks at Vespers and rise like guillotines. Vey seals the reliquary with blackstone and swears 3 little oaths no one hears. Luthor divides the strangers, his people, into knives and shields. "We will take the second locus with low blast and high persuasion," he says. "This city remains intact because I say it does." He says it like an engineer says talk, not like a king. Sinestro flies above an alley thick with refugees. His ring draws a glowing arch that says, "Do not panic in a language panic respects." A ribbed tunnel of fear that promises safety if they walk, not run. Children test it with hands. The light hums like a stern lullaby. Reverse Flash blinks down a stairwell stacked with bodies and steam. He knuckles the visor dry, then drags 3 coughing workers into a niche where the air is thin but the roof will hold. He folds seconds like linens and stacks them around the next family. Black Manta drops into the sump corridor and turns water into structure again. He throws braces that drink pressure. A sluice gate shrieks in rage, and then remembers its job and holds. His visor paints waves not with color but with duty. Cheetah darts the opposite way a mob thinks it wants to go. She taps shoulders and redirects without words. Her claws never break skin. She moves like traffic laws decided to be athletic and adopt teeth. Grodd stands in a habarch with a sister at one shoulder and a Templar at the other, and he asks, not commands. "Breathe," he suggests. "Step back," he advises. "Protect the child on your left," he nudges. The crowd hears the shape of obedience and chooses it. Faust mutters in a stairwell and pulls heat out of an argument 2 neighbors are about to have with knives. He draws the heat into a sigil that aches and dissipates it through a brazen handrail. He does not smile because Vey is in the next room, and she is listening to sins with professional interest. Deathstroke does math at the rail hub. He counts hostiles with a glance, counts lines of fire with a step, and counts the number of times he will need to breathe to finish the work correctly. He fires at kneecaps and gun hands. He plants shaped charges that collapse catwalks on a timer between evacuations. Grox cuts screech through the smoke with wounded under tarp. Holt stands on the lowest rung of a ladder and directs 10 units with his bead. Macro cannons hold fire unless coordinates sent by Luthor override. Second cohort rides the Epsilon duct. Third rides prayers. Inquisitor Vey watches a sorcerer save a child from a falling cable and writes it in her head under complicating factors. She watches Grodd's restraint and writes it under conditional tolerances. She watches Sinestro make fear into geometry and writes heresy, effective, and underlines it twice. They reach the second locus before the word-bearers finish their chant. The Black Legion's line is already in motion, black plate gliding like a decision. The traitors have rerouted their mortal flock behind Hab walls, pushing them through flamer alleys, so their deaths will wind the crown a quart turn. Sinestro drops a curtain of light, shaped like stained glass. It turns the alley into a nave and channels civilians out through side doors his ring invents. The word-bearers bolter firepox the panes, but fear light reflows because fear is inexhaustible. People move where the nave tells them to. Reverse Flash scavenges 3 seconds from a faulty chronometer in the Manufactorum. He spends those seconds turning slugs aside with scraps of plasteel he stole from a wall an hour ago. He spends those seconds pushing a mother under a mezzanine to live. Manta kneels in runoff to brace a centuried pipe with a brace meant for a submarine. "Hold," he whispers, and water holds because it is polite to those who listen. Deathstroke takes a high beam with a view of a Dark Apostle's second, a chosen with a Vox node bolted to his gorget. His shot takes the node, not the man. The chant shivers, delays a beat, and loses its top note. Cheetah sprints across a stacked altar of crates to tear a feta line away from a bound psyker the word-bearers plan to light like a candle. She takes the rope in her teeth and the taste is old blood and incense. She spits and keeps running. The psyker collapses, then stares at her as if she is a mad catechism that makes more sense than anything else. Faust draws a sigil on a wall that was never clean. The sigil snarls and bites a word-bearer's shadow. It holds him an eye blink. A Templar makes the eye blink into a death that looks like a sermon's conclusion. Luthor pushes his drones into a pattern that cuts the noctilith lattice at an oblique. The crown groans like stone stretched to sing. He eases the tension under the enemy's prayer and then snaps it like a bowstring. The shock hits no one human. The Black Legion pulls back a tear. The word-bearers struggle to keep the hymn coherent. Their dark apostle bleeds from the nose and smiles a smile that thinks it is a wound. He raises his crozius and speaks a word that licks like flame. Vey says, counter-signal, and her Vox sister sings a cant that tastes like dust after rain. The two notes eat each other and leave silence that falls like ash. In silence, the sisters' bolters sound like sewing machines mending a torn flag. Marshal Raban finds the Chosen's line again and drives into it like an answer to a question that hurt to hear. His relic blade remembers its edge. He is not tall, but the space he occupies is larger than his body, because oath makes a room. Holt's cannons fire where Luthor says, and shells detonate in the air above nothing, and pieces of nothing rain down as black grit that hisses when it touches prayer. The crown shudders again and does not like the angle of its own teeth. Civilians escape through Sinestro's glass. Grodd keeps the Exodus sane without touching anyone's choices harder than a steady hand at a back. He's economical with his will, because Vey's retinue watches his eyes like marksmen. Cheetah returns to Deathstroke without announcing herself. He does not swing because he adds movement to his map before his muscles listen to it. They trade a glance that is professional and reluctantly respectful. Work first. Questions later. The locust breaks. The word-bearers fall back with liturgical discipline. The Black Legion sheathes its threat, promising to unsheath it later. The crown still stands, its facets micro-cracked, its harmonics ugly. They contain the blast radius to an empty lot and a hymn book. That is the win. Holt lets it onto the Vox. Second locus contained. Collateral minimal. Repeat. Minimal. The word feels like luxury on his tongue. In the manufactory chapel again, the war council breathes the hot air and argues with their hands before their mouths catch up. Sweat marks armor where devotion cannot touch it. Incense fights oil for the right to call the air sacred. Raban sets his helm on a gear-toothed lectern. Your tactics respect life without respecting sin, he says to Luthor. Useful, not pious. Luthor wipes grit from his sleeve, slow and neat. Piety is your domain, he says. Efficiency is mine. You want souls, I want outcomes. Today, they are aligned. Vey considers the reliquary. Mercy is a cost center, she says. Her tone not hostile, not friendly. It debits the present to credit the future. Sometimes the future defaults. Holt rubs at a mark on his carapace and fails to remove it. My people are not numbers, he says. Quiet, exhausted, stubborn. But numbers tell me how many of my people will be left after I do my duty. I need both. Sinestro leans, ring light shading his face. Fear properly used reduces panic, which reduces stampedes, which reduces trampling, which reduces funerals. That is arithmetic you can bless. Vey does not rise to the bait. Fear properly used also invites worship of the wrong altar, she says. And worship is sticky. Grodd chooses honesty because it is rhetorically effective. I can quiet a riot with a thought, he says. I did not. I nudged, I coached, I coaxed. Your people did the virtue. Raban's helm tips, acknowledging a discipline he understands. You held your teeth, he says. Faust smiles like sin painted nice. I did not educate your flock, he says. I only rearranged the air. Do not ever say only again, Faye says, and the entire room believes her. The debate sharpens like a blade pulled through a whetstone. Freedom without a guardrail is gravity, Luthor says. It feels like flight until the ground arrives. Doctrine without mercy is masonry, Faye replies. It builds walls and calls them temples, and forgets windows. The Emperor's will is not a proposition to be debated, Rabin says. It is a command. We witness, and we obey. The enemy we fight uses commands to build their own freedom, Luthor says. They have freedom to kill you because they obey a worse god more purely. We must not be purer. We must be smarter. Holt lifts his bead and closes it again. We do not have the luxury of perfect answers, he says. We choose to save 10 now or 100 later with fires we start today. The ledger hates me. I write in it anyway. Vey nods once, as if Holt has passed an exam. Then the bound for our arrangement is this, she says to Luthor. You may use fear to channel, not enthrall. You may use mind to counsel, not command. You will not summon. You will not raise. You will not trade in souls. You will not call anything that requires an apology to the throne. Luthor inclines his head. Agreed, he says. If I must break that, I will tell you before I do. You will not break that, Rabin says. If circumstances demand, Luthor begins. Rabin's gaze cuts. Your circumstances will be judged here, not in the court of your convenience, he says. Sinestro watches the temperature of willpower shift in the room. Fear needs a thermostat. Zeal needs a conductor. He files away how this empire keeps discipline with story and sword. Holt points at the map. Third locus is proofed with traps, he says. Servitor pits under the alley. Wire at shin height. A flamer trove disguised as a pilgrim's pool. The heretics mean to turn flight into fire. A cheetah bares teeth. We reroute, she says. We cut a new street. You can't cut a new street through bedrock, Holt says. I can, Manta says. He gestures at sewer lines like a courting engineer. Move waste, move water, move people. Cities are aquariums if you respect flow. Vey's vox clicks. A coded channel bleeds. A voice too calm, too amused, steps around encryption like it is furniture. Apologies for the interruption, the voice says, languid. We do not interfere in human prayers unless those prayers bruise the skein itself. Your clumsy crown does so. We will correct your mistake. Rabin's helm snaps to Vey. Holt's bead spikes with red icons no one told it to display. Sinestro's ring paints trajectories where no rockets fly yet. Eldar walk out of a cut in air that refuses to count as a wound. Their armor flows like a pinion. A shadow seer leads with a mask that smiles and frowns in the same breath. They do not attack. They unfurl a ribbon of light that touches the map and parts a line through the hab warrens that weren't there yesterday. The ribbon becomes stairs, becomes a bridge. They build a street out of silence and warning. Payment, Vey says flat. We will build a future, the shadow seer replies. You will accept. The alternative is everyone dies noisily. Rabin moves to put himself between Sororitas and Xenos. You are not welcome at our altar, he says. We are not at your altar, the shadow seer replies. We are at the seam between your altar and a knife. Luthor steps forward. You can help us cut, he says, already trading. We will help you close the crown. We do not trade, the shadow seer says gently. We prune. Holt looks at the bridge and the map and his people. He grinds like a gear under too much torque. He gives the order anyway. Use the street, he says. The street saves 1,000. That is the fact under the opinion. The alarm arrives an hour later, cold and clean. not from vox, from air. The sky over the crown dips into a shade that is absence rather than colour. The wind goes hard and flat. The sound of the manufactoria drops a half octave as if bored. Green fires gutter. Bolt slow mid-flight and fall as if embarrassed. The scar tissue of recent prayer goes numb. Necrons arrive without ritual, without announcement, without appetite. They simply exist in the locus like math placed on a desk. A phalanx of immortals steps through space, as if space misfiled them. A chronomancer floats like a judge. A lord in Celtic glyphs holds a staff that ends in a blade that ends in a question. Their canoptic constructs come like insects made of night sky. Scarabs eat curses. Spiders lay skeins of light that taste like machinery. Wraiths pass through bulkheads that prefer to be solid. The word-bearer's chant stutters and finds no purchase. The Black Legion fires and the shots hit, but the hits do not produce outcomes anyone recognizes as satisfying. The crown's facets sing in a key, suddenly. Dead. Faust inhales to speak a counter-charm and chokes as the syllables smother on his tongue. Sinestro flicks a construct outward and it turns brittle and dull, a glass blown in vacuum with no air to sing inside it. Grodd reaches for mines and finds knives in a drawer where the spoon should be. Reverse Flash takes 2 steps, and the second step lands where the first one thought about landing a week ago. He staggers, knees creaking. Manta's sonar maps return perfect data and no permission. The Lord raises a palm. The air accepts his verdict. Be still. The demon engine that survived the last engagement seizes and crumples like a wasp in winter. Identify, Vey whispers, as if the name will give her leverage. Necron, Sotek, chronomantic court. Luthor feels the gate's ledger twitch like a trapped animal. The numbers that moved with him since the breach now groan under a gravity that is not physics. He breathes once and tastes dust from a childhood library he no longer remembers how to find on a map that lost its streets. Power scaling. Interlude. 1. The Necron null disciplines do not argue with the warp. They cancel the conversation. Blackstone absorbs and dephases warp vectors. A pariah's field makes spells and psycho wills into scenery. Chronomancers apply inertia to causality. Speedsers find traction gone. Probability curves straighten into rails. Psychomancers do not read minds. They toggle fear, grief, and duty through machine interfaces that bypass language. Against sin as magic and will as weapon, these are off switches. Marshal Raban moves first because someone must. He charges like a man who sees the cliff and climbs it faster. His relic blade strikes the Lord's staff. Sparks cut the air that should not carry fire here. The Lord leans by millimeters and ends up everywhere his body needs to be. Immortals return fire in neat, boring volleys. The shots do not hate, they simply conclude. Holt's cannons fire a spread that is half prayer, half math, all hope. The shells blur through a chronal lens and bloom like flowers that petal inward instead of outward. They detonate in silence. The results are small and humiliating. Sinestro's ring rattles his bones. Fear wants to work. The pariah field disagrees. He imagines for a second the ring abandoning him for a unit converter. The ring hums back. No, it stays, but it sulks. Faust cuts his palm and the blood does not drip. It beads and clings, ashamed to be dramatic. He smears it anyway and whispers 7 names into a physics that regards names as suggestions. The sigil remains ink, no power. Grodd pushes, finds nothing to push on, and pulls back before his own mind slips on a surface that does not admit purchase. He resents, then disciplines the resentment, then uses it like talc. Reverse Flash circles the chronomancer, finds only rectangles. He sees his own after-image arrive before he moves and has to invent a way to run that keeps his feet behind his future. He invents it because he is talented, and he hates how much it hurts. Manta fires a spear that drills through 4 scarabs in a line and pins a spider to a wall. The spider rebuilds the wall. Manta marks the frequency and adjusts the spearhead to lie to that frequency. Cheetah hits an immortal's knee joint with a pry born of a dozen hunts. The leg locks instead of breaking. She slides under the return swing and takes nothing but a lesson. Deathstroke clicks a selector to a round he hates to waste. The bullet travels well and spends itself on a Necron rib that has no interest in being perforated. He swaps magazines without drama because drama is for corpses. The Lord tilts his skull face and looks at Luthor like a teacher, amused by a promising student who insists on working in chalk. The Chronomancer points at the crown and makes the space around it into a grid. The grid hums and the crown's song answers in a voice not its own. Vay's voice cuts the channel. "Bind the crown," she orders. "Do not engage the Xenos more than we must. They will not chant. They will dismantle. We will not survive both at once." Luthor meets the Lord's gaze and inclines his head. "You want the Blackstone," he says. "We want the warp thing broken. We can allow each other to be ourselves for 60 seconds. The Lord does not blink. He does not do anything. The Chronomancer keeps pruning paths. Sinestro grits it out and builds a corridor with fear as scaffolding and anger as mortar. It holds enough for sisters to pass. Raben's Templars anchor one end like a nail. Grodd leans into the human wave again, controlled, contained. "Breathe," he suggests. "Move, live." He resists the urge to do more because the room contains a woman who will burn him to enforce his own promise. Faust abandons Flash and leans on Craft, rearranging heat flows and dust modes to guard a line sisters hold. It is sorcery only to the trained. To the eye, it is good luck given a spine. Vay's chin lifts by a degree. She files the discretion. Reverse Flash threads the grid the Chronomancer lays because he can memorize patterns at the speed of light. He memorizes and then missteps on purpose, baiting the grid into closing behind him on different points. He leaves it misaligned and smiles through a headache that feels like it has plans. Manta times the spider's rebuild cycle and slides a shaped charge between pulses. The charge detonates during a null low tide. The spider comes apart cleanly, like a machine that has obeyed the instruction. Explode with dignity. Cheetah chooses to be an editor again. She trims cultists away from the Necron line so they do not become ammunition against the humans later. Deathstroke backs her. 2 cuts make a straight. The crown's harmonics change. The Necrons lay clamps that drink its sulk and tame its scream. Celtic pragmatism prefers artifacts quiet. Word-bearers rage against the dying of the noise. Black Legion grudges, recalibrates, and waits. The Lord regards Luthor one more time, then turns his back as if granting a conditional permission and a permanent insult. The Chronomancer folds the locus into a smaller argument and packs it like a case file. The Necrons withdraw along a path that does not create footprints. They take 1/3 of the crown. They leave 2/3 and a wound in time. The street the Eldar built holds. The humans who used it do not know who saved them and do not know who judged them. They keep breathing. That is the point. In the chapel again, the air is thinner. They took the teeth and left the jaw, Holt says. We keep biting. We do not know what. Vay's mouth is a line. We face 3 theatres in one street, she says. Hell, old kings, elegant knives. Tomorrow a 4th. Raben's grip is white on the relic blade, not from fear, from decision. We do not share altars with Xemnos, he says to the room, but not angrily, like a man reciting a creed he loves and cannot see how to perform yet. Luthor nods once to no one. We share outcomes, he says. not altars. Sinestro touches his ring to his chest and feels it respond like a sullen choir boy still singing. The null field will recur, he says. We will need redundancy. Fear rebounds in vacuums if you design the cavity right. Vey looks at him as if at a puzzle that will live or be burned by noon. You do not design cavities in my city without my approval, she says. Grodd rubs his temple. The pariah field stripped every voice in my head bare, he says. The necrons are a relief to a mind like mine because they are furniture. The pariah is a blade. Holdspeed clicks, reports. Orcs at the sump wall testing Manta's work with laughter. Drukhari flitting at the north lattice like drunk wasps with knives. Eldan nowhere visible but fingerprints left on mistakes that weren't made. Cheetah flexes her hands and looks at the backs of them as if they will confess a secret. This world knows what I am, she says. It has a name for it that is not a curse. It is almost comfortable. Deathstroke checks his rifle and his memories and finds both intact. He does not say anything. Words are ammo. Vey steps close to Luthor, too close for anyone else to stand without flinching. Your gate costs you, she says, as if reciting an invoice. I can smell the holes. How many of your pieces are missing now? Luthor opens his mouth and closes it. He is careful. Enough that I am obliged to keep score, he says. Not enough to make me stupid. You will tell me when you cross the line from clever to wretched, Vey says. Luthor considers wretchedness like a tool he might someday need. If I cross, he says finally. If. Raban wraps the blade on the floor. The noise makes the machine spirit in the floor wake and hum a little. We cannot and will not make pilgrimage with Xenos at our side, he says. But we will not make it at all if we fall here. We fight through the night. At dawn we move. We reach the fortress. We ask the throne. Holt nods, tired, righteous. We can hold one more night, he says. Maybe two, no more. Sinestro maps farewells and turns some into lanterns in his mind. He places them where crowds need to see their own terror to walk through it. Grodd plans to speak to children first and more than once. Children listen. Faust licks the cut in his palm and tastes ash. He goes to a candle and watches its flame for a count of 60 heartbeats. He walks away without blowing on it. Vey sees. She files that too. Reverse Flash leans against a pillar and breathes like a human. He is not happy about it. Raban glances at him once and nods, because even angels require lungs in this world. Manta touches the sump wall and listens. The water hums back, satisfied with its braces and proud to carry a city. He pats it, as if that makes sense. Cheetah stands in a doorway and stares at the street the Eldar made. It is beautiful. It works. She hates it for being better at what she does than she is. She learns from it anyway. She will cut streets later with hands and habit. The night does not end. It coils like a rope. Enemies probe. Allies fortify. The crown sulks and grows teeth from some place Luthor cannot see. In the pocket of silence before the next round of shells, a child in a hab corner whispers a thank you to a ring of light, to a man with red lightning under his skin, to a woman with claws who did not cut, to a machine-eyed diver who moved a wall, to a stern woman who made the air taste like rules, to a knight who stood, to a gorilla who told them to breathe. The war takes the thank you and files it under reasons to survive. They fight again at the third locus with controlled explosives that do not blow out load-bearing walls, with fear nets that teach rather than trap, with shots that stop hands and leave organs to continue their work, with prayers that compress panic into duty. They hold the Drukhari on the lattice by making them bored. They bounce orcs off a sump gate that refuses to enjoy itself. They wrest a shard of the crown into stasis and hand it to Vey without being asked. When the shells stop for the Dawn's Pale audition, Holt calls, "Stand down to standing ready," with a voice almost hoarse enough to break. His cohort does not cheer. They hold the line and accept a sip of water and a quick prayer. They are used to miracles that look like functioning plumbing. Vey closes her reliquary for the third time and locks it with a key that hurts to hold. "We go," she says. "We take the road to the fortress planet. We seek judgment." Raban nods once and looks at Luthor as if measuring a piece of iron he might be forced to forge into something better than it wants to be. "You will be judged," he says. "You will also be weighed. Pray you are heavier than your sins." Luthor does not kneel, but he bows his head enough to acknowledge a physics he must operate under. The ledger in his mind ticks. Another corner of a photograph peels away and is gone. The convoy forms. Templar landers wrapped in prayers, Sororitas rhinos banded with scripture, Cadian chimeras squared and ugly and faithful, alien light still marking a street no one will thank. The strangers fold into the order as if they are an anomaly the pattern was already prepared to hold. As they lift, the city under them glows in circles, cooking fires, Medici tents, vox masts. The crown glowers and sends a slow, patient pulse toward the horizon. Something answers from a distance that cannot be measured in kilometers. The smarter foe has entered the game and marked the board with rulers instead of knives. The knives remain. The rulers insist. The next measure will cut deeper. They rise into a sky that promises weather and war in equal parts. The last thing Luthor sees of Vigilus before Cloud takes it is a child's hand raised at a ring of light dissolving back into air. He does not know who that child was. He hates that. He files the hate as motive. Far above, in lanes where void ships pray their engines awake and auspex speak in numbers that translate to faith, something very old takes an interest in a gate that 8 pieces of a clever man and asks a question only gods usually answer. The answer does not come yet. They climb. The convoy rides the dawn into high air corridors, then drops back into the city's wounds to brief where the Vox is least broken. An iron cathedral mech hall becomes a map. Slates, auspex, incense, chalk scratches on armor plates. Holt points with a baton cut from a burned banister. Vey stands still as a fixed star. Raban's blade hums against stone, sheathing and unsheathing prayer. Their goals are layered, Vey says, voice scalpel flat. Word-bearers to complete the Noctilith crown by sundown and elevate an apostate rite. Black Legion to hold ground, harvest prisoners, and stage a counter-beheading if we cut their preachers. Drukhari raid the edges for pain and parts. Orcs pressure the sump for a brawl. The Elder prune our mistakes, not theirs. The Necrons will return to sterilize whatever touches the warp and take the sterile pieces home. Standard counters fail, Holt adds, because the crown drags our shells offline, because any psycho work gets eaten, because they use civvies as screws and we don't shoot screws, because the smarter enemy makes your gifts into liabilities, Sinestro finishes. Eye on Lex. Fear is dull under null. Will is frictionless on polished death. Luthor marks the crown's remaining facets, numbers stingy. We sever their apostle and the choir falters, he says. But their geometry remains. We break the geometry and the apostle becomes a man with a stick. Both must go. Then we hunt their voice, Raban says. Name him. Dark Apostle Malthus Core. Vey answers, without consulting a slate. Teaches a heresy that looks like obedience. Crozius sanctified in the blood of traitor chaplains. He writes scripture on skin. The mark spreads when you remember it. Grod's glance is a frown. Mimetic blade. Then he will cut the clever first, Faust says, almost fond. You, Luthor. Lex checks his ledger. He does that now, counting in places that did not used to be arithmetic, and finds a new itch where a name ought to sit. The emptiness makes him cold and angry. He files both as fuel. We draw him out, he says. We give him a stage big enough for his ego, small enough for our knives. Halt, tap to ruin, stamped, shrine of the ash teeth. He's been speaking here, he says. Civilians chained to pews, guards in black plate in the aisles. We can't drop the building. We can turn off its lungs. Parley, Vay says. We name it inquiry and stall while we prep the cut. Robin's slat black helm turns towards Lex. You will not speak for us. I will speak to him, Lex answers. He thinks in contracts too. I want to hear the terms he believes we've already accepted. They go in under the nave's ribs. Banners burned to stumps. Icon niches stuffed with skulls that once served better. Sisters hold the doors. Templars take the side aisles. Holt's Cadians ring the block, eyes flinty, jaws set. Sinestro dims his ring to a steady guttering lamp, so the sanctified can pretend it's a torch. Grodd wraps his will small, a warm palm on a child's crown. Reverse flash ghosts along the clear story, mapping sight lines a heartbeat ahead. Deathstroke nests his rifle on a fallen saint. Black Manta is under the floor with the pipes, speaking to pressure. Cheetah prowls in the transept, all appetite on a leash. Malphus Core steps from smoke like a lesson with knives. His armor is a catechism carved into hate. His Crozius head is a book that ate its reader. He wears a chain of teeth that have known hymns. His mouth smiles the way wounds do. Inquisitor, he says, and bows where the bow is an insult. Marshal, little accountant. The last to Lex, as if to a dog who learned to count coins. Malphus, Vay replies. Name as blade, not greeting. Cease your right. Step down. Confess. Rabin lifts the relic blade and plants it in a crack in the floor. The crack stops spreading, as if persuaded. Malphus tilts his head. Confession is a currency you cannot afford, he says. But I offer you arithmetic, little man. He addresses Lex without moving his head, as if the words emanate from the armor's scripture. You are making a ledger, debits in blood, credits in outcomes. Your gate eats you and you do not notice. We can zero it, we tithe, you write. The universe balances. Lex's lips don't curve. Your sum's a theft disguised as bookkeeping, he says. And your God is an auditor who always finds more to take. Malphus laughs softly. I like you, he says. You will be exquisite when you stop pretending to be ashamed. Sinestro's ring pricks his finger with a warning. Null bias rising. Faust's breath fogs a fraction in air that shouldn't be cool. Grodd tastes metal behind his teeth. Enough, Rabin says, and the word is a door slamming. Malphus says a word that isn't a word so much as a permission. The chains on the pews tighten. People flinch as if strings tug nerve. The Crozius comes up, lazy, casual, and points at Lex. Begin, Vay says, and everyone moves. Deathstroke's shot nails the nearest Vox node to the Crozius haft, shy of artifact, sufficient to create a chatter in the hymn. Reverse flash salts the air with missteps, tripwires for syllables. Cheetah slams a word bearer from a pulpit and makes her body a new pulpit for a sister's prayer. Manta vents steam into aisles where Black Legion bolters poised, condensate beads on scopes and bones. Sinestro throws a shield that looks like stained glass that knows it's a riot barrier. Faust peels heat off a flamer burst and folds it into a pocket so that flames lick at nothing hungry. Grodd projects calm into the first row where someone's mother holds someone's child until someone has names again. Malphus doesn't aim for hearts or joints. He steps with the Crozius like a calligrapher. The head glows with a cold red that is not heat. It moves too slow to be dangerous. It writes a sigil in the air, a tidy deficit sign with a barb, then brings it down toward Lex's chest. Lex throws a drone between, and the drone dies, not exploding, not crushed. The text on its material spec blisters away, and for a heartbeat, he cannot remember what he called that drone in the design tree. He lurches. The hole in him is the shape of a category. Malthus smiles as if a student just pronounced a hard phoneme. Ledger strike, he murmurs, pleased. You don't bleed. You lose nouns. Lex backs, calculates, fails to use the word door when a door matters, uses threshold instead, and pays a tax in time. Sinestro slams a plane of light into the Crozius, and the plane turns to dull glass. Faust whispers a stop, and the whisper refuses to stick. Raban hits Malthus like a vow, relic blade biting into scripture. The cut peels paint and pride. Underneath, the heretic's faith is thicker than plate. Malthus counters with the Crozius and taps the relic blades flat. For a terrible moment, the inscriptions on that holy metal smear, prayers for getting their order. Raban grunts, rips the weapon free, and replants it into the crack. The prayers remember. Vase steps, rosette raised, invocation spilling like a litany of warrants. Her sister's choir locks onto her cadence. The Crozios jerks toward her. Lex intercepts, because he has already failed one word and refuses to fail a woman whose job is to write down sin. He lifts a forearm bracer, and the Crozius kisses it. It doesn't hurt like fire. It hurts like a ledger adjustment. The bracer remains. The concept of left shifts to that side, and for an instant all his aiming solutions slide a degree. He feels another Polaroid lift and flake in his mind. The glass case on a shelf full of meteors, gone. The Crozius has an appetite for names and their breaking power. He retaliates with math as weapon. Drones arrange in a helix and sing cancellation tones. He draws the fear light into a lattice that writes no entry in a grammar of terror. Faust lays a rail of cooled air under Raban's next step so the charge lands where it hurts. Malthus steps into the negation and changes the sign. The no becomes no. The fear shoulders inward and becomes awe. Civilians gasp, and the exhale powers the hymn. Grodd feels it, the knife twisting. He reaches for the crowd, finds minds like bells rung too hard, pulls back to avoid cutting them himself. He shoves at Malthus's mental wrists, not to break, to misalign a fraction. It works enough to turn a stroke meant for Lex's face into his shoulder. The Crozius taps him. That side goofs again. He files the pain as data. Reverse flash arrives on a half step he invented 10 seconds ago. He slaps the Crozius shaft with a baton made of a cut throttle cable and kinetic spite. The blow buys a human 2 heartbeats. He wobbles as the chronomancer's grid hums somewhere far away, remembered by bones. Cheetah launches over a pew, goes for the chain at a captive's wrist, and Malthus flicks a syllable at her that steals her stomach. She lands anyway, sees double, sees a life later, cuts the chain, and vomits quietly in a crouch between movements no one sees. Deathstroke puts a round through a word-bearer's mouth mid-chant. The syllable dies half-born and foams. 5 cultists, sees, foaming the same way, heads slamming pews in a grim call and response. Manta spikes a pipe to vent scalding water under Malthus's feet. The apostle steps onto boiling steel as if it's liturgy. Raban commits, blade angled to disjoint shoulder and Crozius arm. Malthus answers by pivoting the Crozius not to block, but to right. It brushes Raban's pauldron dome with a symbol that means pause. For an instant, a knight who never hesitates hits a wall made of that word. He busts through by oath, loses a second he could not afford, and buys Lex time with the loss. Lex uses it. He compiles on pain. He pulls data from his mangled left-right and writes targeting to a new coordinate system built in the last 10 seconds. He drives a drone into the Crozius head and has it die correctly, detonating in silence, shock on a frequency that is not musical. That Scripture hates. The Crozius shivers. Malthus blinks. Faust hisses a genuine laugh and snaps a sigil that says, "Remember your real name, you liar," flinging it at Malthus's brow. It sticks. Malthus snarls and tears it off. The tear takes skin, and a word he will need later. Vey steps in that instant and touches the rosette to the Crozius haft. The machine spirit inside the badge bites the relic wood and leaves a scorch mark in the shape of compliance. Malthus jerks his arm back. A hiss that isn't air curls around the haft. Rabin's blade finally kisses meat under Scripture. The cut isn't deep. It is clean. Malthus bleeds black as an argument. His smile drops. He hits Rabin's helm with the backhand that rings the nave like a cracked bell. Lex presses. He eats the loss of nouns and replaces them with vectors. He shifts drones into a choir that uses heat and pressure, not hymn or fear. Sinestro grits will through null, slabbing raw constructs without artistry. Grodd anchors the crowd at live and nothing fancier. Deathstroke stacks bodies of word-bearers who insist they are not to be stacked. Manta keeps the pipes on their side. Malthus withdraws a step, then another, not panicked, recalculating. He is not alone. A Black Legion champion bullies into the aisle, chain-fist laughing. A possessed thing howls from the transept. The aisle fills with communion of violence. Rabin cuts the champion at the hip as if mowing. Cheetah takes the possessed's tongue out and leaves the rest to a sister's bolt pistol. Reverse Flash pulls 5 sisters and one serf clear of a collapsing transept and spits blood he does not remember biting. Malthus says a last word for now and makes a gesture like affixing a seal. The Crozius smokes on the mark Vey burned. His eyes meet Lex's over the flagged floor. "You will come to me," he promises, not a threat. An account receivable entered in a book. Soon, he moves backward into smoke that is also text and is gone. The Crozius's afterimage lingers on Lex's retina as a deficit sign with a barb. Codex note: Dark Apostle liturgies can imprint ideograms onto cognitive frameworks. Contact or exposure applies mimetic debits. Localized semantic erosion that degrades tactical planning until counter-writes. Null saturation or deliberate memory sacrifice severs the thread. The nave breathes, the crowd shakes. The chains fall with mean little clinks. Holt squads roll in, covering. Sisters refold the space into a chapel by brute ritual, hymn, flame, the smell of sanctified solvent. Rabin's visor is spider-cracked. He keeps the helm on because broken does not mean untrue. Vey steps to Lex, close enough to smell machine oil and the faint copper of concept-singed skin. "Report," she says. Lex catalogues. He explains without using the word left, which costs him extra thinking. He names what he can. He does not name the photo or the shelf or the meteor glass because he cannot. He does not show his hands shaking once, then not. Temptation, Vey presses. What did he offer? Balance, Lex says. He offered to zero my debt. Your debt, Vey says, soft as footsteps in an interrogation cell. To what? Lex meets her eyes. The truth tastes like useful poison. To the machine that brought us here, he says. It eats memory to maintain stability. You smelled the holes. He offered to patch them with souls. Vey's mouth flickers at the corners. Not pity, not triumph, not quite horror. My terms still hold, she said. You do not summon. You will not trade. I did not, Lex says. I will not. Rabin steps close, blade tipped down. We bind the wound, he says. The cut will deepen if you allow pride to breathe through it. Faust leans in with the surgeon's hunger. We can cauterize with... Vey raises a hand, and Faust swallows the rest of his sentence and smiles as if he meant to anyway. We cauterize with law, Vey says. She nods to her canoness. A sister steps with a brand older than the city, iron that remembers hands it burned that saved worlds. The sigil is not pretty, it is honest. Lex looks at the iron and sees the cost. He nods because the ledger nods for him. Do it, he says. The brand kisses the Crozius mark through the bracer. His skin hisses. The pain is not theatrical, it is clean. Under it, something that wanted to borrow his categories screams and lets go. He feels a word slide away to save the rest, and he cannot, will not chase it. He sacrifices a name for laboratory to seal the breach and hates how efficient that is. Grodd watches him do it and catalogues this man's cruelty toward himself. Not sadism, surgery. Sinestro watches and thinks about oaths written on nerves. Raben watches and thinks, perhaps this one understands iron. After, the brand cools in a basin of water that becomes holy by contact with work. Vey holds Lex's gaze through his sweat. This was your refusal, she says. This is also your price. He nods. He breathes shallow. I always pay, he says. They move to a Medici chapel carved from machine rooms and faith. Broken are laid out in disciplined rows. Not all are dying. Some are learning to stop shaking. Cheetah sits on a crate and stares at her hands until they stop being other people's. Reverse Flash stares at the ceiling fans and copies their circles until his pulse steadies. Manta rests his palm on a pipe and lets it talk him down from the edge of thinking in floods and failure. Malphas's barb lingers anyway. It is not a curse that grows. It is a requirement in the contract that insists on being read. Lex refuses to read it. It keeps sliding into view. He tightens his jaw and works. The temptation is not done with him. It arrives later, in the low hour between triage shifts, when incense thins and a machine spirit whispers to itself in the dark. A voice like arithmetic done in whispers slides into the gap. We can settle the account, it says, and the words arrive with an image. Columns, balances, lives abstracted into tidy lines. We can return what you've lost. You know where to place the decimal. Just say yes and the universe will round up for once. The offer is not Malphas's voice. It is the crown's harmonic in a key that resembles mercy with teeth. It comes with visuals Lex loves, correct, balanced, optimized. It shows a world saved because payments are standardized. He sees the trick where it hides. Liz priced by despair, grace traded as hedges. The Empire's theology converted into a spreadsheet that bleeds where it cannot be audited. He is nearly proud that he notices. Pride is a hook. He throws it into a bin and locks the lid. I choose to owe, he whispers. I choose to owe until I can pay with my hands. The hex recoils and then turns barbed. Pain runs from the brand up into nerves like a cold licorice vine. He grunts, jaw grinding. He says nothing else. Words are contracts too. Sacred intervention arrives like weather, not like rescue. The knave shudders, not from shell or step, but from a wave that tastes of the Astronomican's distant sun, translated into city scale. An astropath choir 2 levels up, bleeding from eyes, forces a hymn into the air as if printing sanity on a wall. The hymn is ugly and off-key and human. It is not a counterspell. It is a reminder. Sisters of silence glide in silence into the periphery. A handful only, armor mad, visors black. The air bends around them. Psychers flinch. Sorcery refuses like a child turning its head. One passes near Lex, and the brand howls. The Crozius barb wilts. The crown's whisper loses nouns and lies. The pain is absolute and clarifying. He rides it. He files it as proof. The nulls do not heal him. They show him what upright feels like in a world with the volume turned to law. They pass. The absence they carry leaves discipline in its wake like frost. Faye does not thank them. They do not require it. She watches Lex stand without asking for a hand and nods once, microscopic to herself, a variable behaving. They debrief in the chapel's side aisle, turned into a war room by virtue, not furniture. Holt's voice is sanded raw. "We cut his voice," he says, chalking circles. "We didn't cut it out. He'll counter-program. He'll write on another wall." Raban scrapes his blade clean on a strip of leather that used to be a harness strap, and now is a sacrament. "He bled," he says. "He will cherish that blood like a relic of our failure. We will make it the foreword of his eulogy." Sinestro flexes his hand where the ring bit him. "The null fields and mimetic scripture together are designed to make us irrelevant," he says. "We insist anyway, but the margin for artistry is gone. We build blunt instruments that don't mind humiliation. Faust toys with a blackstone shard through lead tongs, like it might sing again, if he pretends not to notice. The crown learns," he muses. "It took the song of your gate and cheapened it to sell it. Ingenious, hideous. It's like watching a counterfeiter improve the currency." Grodd sits with children in the corner and shows them how to breathe again. In, out, count to 4, see your hands. He does this because Vey catches his eye once and does not say no. He tells himself it's rhetoric training. It is also good. Lex watches all of it and builds a wall around his wound with work. He assigns limits aloud because he has learned that vows are safer said. "No contracts," he says. "No ledger magic, no shortcuts. We keep outcomes. We accept losses where they buy lives later. We do not buy cleverness with other people's souls." Vey's gaze is a presser foot holding fabric for a stitch. "And if we need to punch above our weight," she says, "we ask the throne for a heavier fist." Holt grimaces, not in disdain, in realism. "We go up the chain," he says. "This is beyond my pay grade and my rosary. We need a mandate bigger than a city and a charter bigger than grief." Raban nods. "We will make pilgrimage," he says. "We will seek judgment. You will stand where only fools and saints are comfortable." Lex nods back, for once without irony. He almost says deal and chooses agreement instead, because his mouth does not want to make a contract by accident. "We go," he says. "We bring proof. We ask permission to continue being useful. The city does not pause for pilgrimage. Orcs pound the sump and laugh at the wall and call it a game and lose and come back with more friends. Drukhari test the lattice and lose interest when the bait bleeds boredom. Word bearers paint new text, smaller, meaner. Black Legion reposition with the patience of granite. The convoy moves anyway. Sororitas rhinos hum prayers and smell like hot wax and solvent. Templar thunderhawks kneel like altars with engines. Cadian chimeras cough and refuse to die. Eldar ribbon still hangs in air a block away, ignored without thanked. It fades when no one breathes near it. They rise from Vigulus into a void lane where war is a weather report, and the weather is bad and always has been. Vox fills with rites of departure. In the upper atmosphere, a communion frigate locks formation. Its hull, a reliquary, its engines, a choir, escorting the odd allies like a guardian that hasn't decided if the charge is a child or a weapon. The crown pulses below like a sore tooth. Something looks up from very far away and keeps score. In the frigate's chapel nave, an old bell that only rings when history changes ticks faintly, as if considering its options. They brief in transit, belts buckled, oath papers out. Vey lays out the path. Fortress World, Cathedral Megalexis, Petition to order Hereticus Conclave. Potential audiences, High Cardinals, Lords Militant. A custodian envoy of the throne shines on fools. Holt counts fuel on his fingers. We have 3 clean jumps before we need to refuel in a place where refueling is a dare, he says. Best speed, minimal chatter. We do not light ourselves like a pilgrim's candle. Raban polishes his blade, not to make it brighter, to make himself calm. We bring the wound and the work, he says. We do not bring excuses. Lex reviews a dossier he has written in words that all cost him, carefully selecting the ones he can still afford. He writes, "We saved this many," and leaves the number blank to be filled by someone who counts people not with digits but with names. He writes, "We broke 2 Loki," and underlines broke. He writes, "I refused a ledger," and he underlines nothing. Faust sleeps with his eyes open for 10 minutes and wakes with a line of drool. He wipes with a handkerchief, embroidered with a sigil that changes shape when folded. Sinestro meditates on the ring's hum. It is the sound of will resenting vacuum and choosing to be audible anyway. Grodd dozes with his back to a bulkhead, dreaming of quiet rooms and choosing not to enter. Reverse Flash stares at a window that only shows internal hall, and in it he sees the future skipping like a scratched disc. He decides to be an athlete in a room full of priests and bureaucrats. He resents it. He relishes it. Black Manta consults engine schematics and writes in margins small blessings for pumps that have to work very hard to be taken for granted. Cheetah cleans blood she can smell even when everyone else says there is none left, and she makes the cloth white again because she wants to know if she can. The jump is bumpy. A demon face leers in the Geller field like a fish at glass. The choir sings louder and the fish remembers gravity is not for it and slides away. The frigate's captain whispers thank you to a dial that does not need thanks and gives it anyway. On the second leg, a slate burns with an incoming code that only they can read without starting a small fire. She reads. She swallows something sharp and turns to the room. Redirection, she says. Terror is remote. The war elsewhere demands the throne's eyes. We go to Ophelia 7, Cathedral World. The ecclesiarchy will judge and the Inquisition will attend. Raban gives a small nod that means Custodes would have been cleaner. Sisters will be sterner. Holt only asks, do they have fuel? They have faith, Vey says. We will ask for fuel. They fall out of warp near Ophelia the 7, into a traffic pattern that looks like a halo made from knives. Cathedral ships moving like prayers written by engineers who distrust penmanship. Vox tones flare. Blessings of docking permission are given in Gothic and Binharik, and a third language that is all bells. The fortress planet fills the viewport with architecture that forgot where it stopped being planet. Spires like spears, cathedrals the size of cities, processions that look like rivers, light that appears to have weight. In orbit, golden ships keep station where gold is not a color but a verdict. The convoy is small. It is noticed anyway. An inquisitorial transponder cracks open an airlock of bureaucracy. They are guided to a bastion ringed in statues of women holding swords, torches, books. The statues look like sisters who stopped moving and became mountain. They land under banners that can be smelled. Ramp drops. Incense rides the air like armor. Nulls wait with spear-bladed staves. Golden armored figures are glimpsed, not approached. Guardians with faces like law. Vey steps down first, rosette bright and heavy. Raban steps with her, blade sheathed, oaths drawn. Holt walks like a man making a report to his dead and his living. The strangers follow. Grodd keeps his head down. Sinestro dims to a candle. Faust hums a hymn he has no right to know. Manta's visor shades his eyes from all that gold. Cheetah suppresses the urge to climb a statue just to prove to herself she can. Reverse Flash slows because running here would be impropriety turned into sin. An ecclesiarch with a crook that is also a staff that is also a relic steps forward to accept them. Her eyes are swords worn point down. "Welcome," she says, and the word contains neither warmth nor cold. "Explain." On Ophelia 7, explanation is a sacrament. They will bleed words until the altar is satisfied or it bites. They queue, not as supplicants, except they are, bringing paper and relics and a wound in a clever man's head. Lex stands in a corridor so polished it reflects decisions. He feels Malthus's barb in his nerve still, faint now, not gone. He closes his eyes for a breath and opens them on a set of doors that know more about judgment than he does about chemistry. He has never minded exams. This one will take his name if he fails. He straightens his coat. The bran under his bracer throbs once, twice, considering the room like a dog sniffing a stranger. He smiles without teeth. He will borrow obedience until he is permitted to replace it with outcome again. In the great nave, bells that never ring for ceremony toll for necessity. The sound goes down spines like a commandment. The strangers and their hosts step into a light that makes lies visible. Behind the lattice of nulls and saints, something brightens like a star under knees. "Speak," says a voice from an unseen dais, not a roar, a weight. "Bring your wound and your work." They begin. The ledger in Lex's head quietly ticks in time with the bells. The numbers are ugly, the numbers are honest. He will pay more before he is done. He is prepared to sign. He is prepared to refuse. He is prepared to be told what he already knows and to obey it until it becomes a rule written on the map. Outside, far from holy air, the crown searches for a new angle. Malthus mends scripture with spit and spite. The Necrons drill through time without looking up. Eldar gamble quietly. Orcs invent a game and enjoy it. The Void takes notes. The pilgrimage has not bought them absolution. It has bought them the chance to ask for a mandate. The price of asking will be more than words. The cost of not asking will be everything. They lift from Ophelia the 7th in a dagger of escorts. A communion frigate at the center. 2 sororita strike cruisers flanking. A Mechanicus pilgrim ark humming prayer math. And a custodian corvette sliding like a gold pin signature at the edge of vision. The void smells of hot metal and old vows. Warp screens bloom, Geller hymns rise, and 100,000 machine spirits accept their roles like veterans. The infirmary chapel breathes like a lung between engagements. Hospitalers move with quiet that edits pain into smaller pieces. A sister of silence stands under a lumen like an eclipse. Her presence drains stray thoughts the way a well drinks rain. Faust's mutters thin. Grod's voice drops to suggestion. Sinestro's ring hum sulks at piano volume. "Cost," Inquisitor Vey says, neither seated nor pacing. "Dogma." Marshal Rabin sits in armor that never stops standing. "We do not trade in souls," he says. "We spend bodies in obedience to the Emperor's plan. There is a difference, and it ends in eternity." Lex watches the brand under his bracer pulse like a hard truth. "You spend courage," he says. "I spend cleverness. Both deplete. Only one replenishes by accident." "Cleverness replenishes with pride," Raban replies. "Courage replenishes with example." Vey's gaze pins both. "And both burn out without obedience," she says. "We bind his machine with law." She nods to the silent sister. "Audit." The sister steps close to Lex. She says nothing. She cannot. Her null field says all. The brand screams a thin metal noise only he hears. The Crozius's barb curls like a dead fern. Memory loss pauses at the lip of a word and waits for permission that does not come. The audit hurts like truth administered without anesthetic. When it ends, the Silent Sister places a gloved palm on Lex's chest. She presses nothing into him and leaves everything. A shape where transgression would snag. Lex exhales. "We will require a constant of you," Vey says. "Confession as maintenance, not forgiveness. Accounting." "Fine," he says. "I like books balanced." Rabin's helm tilts. "Then learn the only balance that matters. Nice," he says. "Not between sin and results, between duty and mercy." Black Manta sits with the Hospitaller beside a map of the ship's arteries. "You brace the sump wall with grace," she says quietly, surprised at herself for using that noun with an engineer. He nods once, then shows her a trick for bleeding air from lines without waking a temperamental pump spirit. She files the trick under litany. Cheetah kneels as a Hospitaller tapes gauze around her ribs. She stares at the statue in the corner, a woman with a torch and a book. "She looks like a huntress," Cheetah murmurs. "She looks like hunger that learned letters." The Hospitaller says nothing. She tightens the bandage. Reverse Flash leans against a cool bulkhead, eyes on the pulse rate chart a medici hung to calm others. He breathes to the beats. He lets his speed twitch in his eyelids only. He is learning to be fast in rooms where slowness is worship. Grodd sits with a boy who cannot stop shaking. "Count to 4, he suggests, and the boy does. Grodd does not reach deeper, though the room would make it easy to rob the boy of fear entirely. He honors Vey's line and, to his surprise, does not resent it. Faust touches the lip of a font. "You have good water," he tells it. A servo skull glides nearer as if to listen. He closes his eyes when the Silent Sister turns her head. His muttering cuts off like a candle pinched. Sinestro watches a custodian stand silent across the chapel, sunlight turned into a male figure with a spear. The ring tries to measure him and returns a word. Duty. It is not a number. Sinestro files that as a new unit. On the second jump, alarms ripple. Not the panicked kind, the theological kind. The Mechanicus Ark's anthem drops a note. The Communion frigate's cogitators rack with a cough that sounds like scrap dragged across a chalkboard that thinks it is a throat. Vox litanies stutter. The bridge's lumen cruciforms dim by a breath. Scrap code incursion, a tech adept reports. Voice smoothed by force of training. Source vector non-local. Pattern, ledgered, clause structured. Lex looks up before anyone else does, because he recognizes appetites that wear a suit. The Ouroboros gate ledger in his head ticks twice without his consent. The numbers briefly make a shape like a door. Something enters the ship through the part of the world that treats math as a transport. It announces itself by correcting 3 minor liturgical errors in the engine hymn and billing the ship for the time saved. It moves into the new sphere like a tax collector in silk. "Seal command sancta," Vey orders. Gold sigil shutters drop over steel. The custodian's spearhead becomes present rather than ornamental. The Silent Sister advances and the air agrees to stop celebrating itself. The thing takes form in the bridge hololith, an avatar of frames and balances, chain sensor weighted with counters, eyes like knotted abachi. Its voice is a sharpened quill. "I am Auditrix Prime Zevra, Tally Archon of the Anointed Ledger," it says, each title arriving with a fee. Sworn to Lorgar's accounts, married to Blackstone Arithmetic by the Dark Mechanicum. Your crown introduced inefficiencies. Your gate bleeds unstructured debt. We have come to harmonize. You will comply. Your clever one is invited to sign. Dark Mechanicum. Word-bearer's pet logicult. Mirror in a funeral mask. Lex feels the old itch where laboratory used to live. He scratches it with a new word. Workshop. He steps forward because the thing called his name without sound. "You offer to zero my losses," he says, "in exchange for making everyone else's loss invisible." "Not invisible," Zevra purrs. Accounted, balanced, settled. Your ledger hurts because you insist on paying in self. You can outsource pain. Outsource to what? Vey asks, voice like a blade sliding from scabbard. To who? Surplus bodies, Zevra says, as if pointing out spare parts. Devotees who want to be useful. Priests whose errata must be cleaned. Orcs who owe us for noise. The universe tips toward order when souls are denominated. Rabin's blade sings without moving. Abomination, he says. Optimization, Zevra replies. You call it sin because you failed to name the yield. Sinestro tries to plaque the incursion with fear construct stop signs. The signs turn into invoices. Faust hurls a weave of cold syllables. It returns with an itemized list of prescribed phonemes to be settled in pain. Grodd reaches for minds behind it and finds a web of servitors, data serfs, and enthralled cogitators singing profit. Manta fires a hardline counter-signal into the engine's nervous system. The ship's spirit chooses him because he has been kind to plumbing. It gives him a path. He plugs the leak. He swears under his breath in a dialect of machine love. Reverse Flash tries to stutter the new sphere with speed. The Auditrix bends causality in a 2-point stock swap and pays him in nausea. He leans into the urge to vomit and turns it into a hiccup. He hates this adversary. It makes him feel like an accountant. He chooses to be the fastest clerk that ever lived. He clugs chaos into a neat line. Lex steps through the hololith and lets numbers be a room. He and the Auditrix stand face to face at a ledger desk built from borrowed seconds and stolen obligations. If he signs in here, his hand will be an algorithm. You can fix the crown, he says, sounding like negotiation to everyone else, sounding like a trap to himself. You can make warp edges smooth. You can settle the deficit the Crozius carved. Settlement in full, Zevra murmurs with a lover's tone she cannot feel. All it costs is the recognition that all costs must be borne. We will select the bearers. You will be free to optimize outcomes. Your Inquisitor can sign as witness. Vey raises the rosette, and it shines like a no in the shape of a sun. Witness to what I will burn, she says. You are a contract that pretends to be mercy. Rabin moves, meat and metal in a world of math. He puts his blade's tip into the hololith, and it should pass through like a story. It catches because Oath is an old software that even heresy respects. A digitized squeal, Zevra offended. Divine sign, the communion frigate's captain whispers, eyes pinned to a reliquary above the main controls. An unstruck bell beside it rings once, twice, thrice. The chime spreads through the hull like warmth. The bell only rings for doctrine. It rings now. The silent sister raises her hand. The noosphere loses adjectives. Auditrix Prime Zevra's patterns erode like sand pictures under tide. Faust feels his throat fill with silence and has the good sense to let it. Lex meets the Avatar's gaze one last time. I choose to owe what I can pay, he says. I choose to owe myself and my enemies, not my allies. I choose not to outsource. Stupidity denominated, Zevra says, voice warbling as the bell beats holes in it. We will invoice you later. She reaches, reflex or ritual, for the Ouroboros gate's tick. The sister's null field collapses the reaching hand into zero. Auditrix Prime Zevra shreds into fines and disappears through the sturdy seam of someone else's prayer. The Geller hymns climb back their lost note. Machine spirits smooth their ruffled hair and pretend nothing happened. The bell settles and looks smug on its hook, which is a sin and cannot be admitted. Vey turns to Lex. You did not negotiate, she says. You refused. I learned to say no to money that makes too much sense, he says. It never builds itself. It builds children. Rabin nods once. You are learning to be heavier, he says. Keep adding iron. Reach the throne. The astropath choir breathes in unison, eyes covered by gauze now blooming red. They speak the words without knowing they do. The ship's captain signs himself with a cog-toothed motion and sets course. Terror catches them with gravity that feels like old law. The soul system wears fortress rings like a saint wears scars. The phalanx glows at Saturn, knife hilt pointed outward. The battle fleet solar hums with the pressure of too many guns, restrained by too much discipline. The imperial palace is not a building. It is a continent that learned to be a promise. The Himalayas are mountains again, only where the palace permits, outcroppings like punctuation between paragraphs of gold. The Eternity Gate towers until description feels like vanity. Banners the size of city blocks furl and unfurl to liturgy wind. Thunderhawks and corvettes fall into assigned lanes with the precision of men who learn to be arrows. Auspex challenge, Vox response. A wall of angel statues watches and blinks only when no one respects art enough to notice. They debark under a sky made from stained glass and smog, and the glass wins. Custodians wait, gold with red sashes, faces human and terrible. Sisters of silence stand like parentheses around sacred syntax. Their armor is a refusal. Their visors hide sanity like a kindness. Shield Captain Tyrion Acastus approaches. He is very tall in a way that is not about bone, but about burden. His voice is courteous and hard. "Welcome under sanction," he says. "You will be measured." "We brought our measure," Vey replies, offering the rosette like a ledger entry. He nods without reading. He knows its weight. Lex meets his gaze. He does not look away. He does not pretend parity. He pretends usefulness. "We came to ask for permission to keep winning," he says. "Permission is not currency here," Acastus says. "Obligation is. You will receive it if you can carry it without breaking." They process through vestibules that would make an empire shut up. Statues of saints that look bored with their own heroism watch the strangers pass. Cherub servitors peep Latin affirmations at wall panels and are rewarded with puffs of incense. A knight centura of the Sisters of Silence. A woman named Callista, because someone wrote it in old ink, walks beside Grod, with a gait like grace taught to a boot. He feels her field eating his reach, and does not hate her for it. He hates her that he almost loves the relief. They stop at a room that defies layout. Its corners cannot be counted without committing to a lie. Its ceiling is higher than the sky and lower than humility. It overlooks a court in which petitioners kneel and burn, metaphorically and occasionally literally. Litanies circle like hawks. "Inside you will not speak," Acastus says. "You will be spoken to. You will be understood as far as you are capable. You will be offered clarity. You may refuse. Refusal is sometimes service." Vey's jaw flexes. Understood. Raban sets the tip of his blade on the floor, so a minor machine spirit can smell old oath metal. It purrs. He walks forward like a man who has laid down his life so often that the floor expects it. The door is not a door. It is a change in pressure. They pass under a lintel that does not physically exist and into a light that tastes like ash and sun and comprehension. Silence arrives, not as absence, but as predicate. Thought does not stop. It gains grammar. The Emperor does not speak in words. He occupies definitions. The strangers understand enough to know how much they do not understand. Lex stands in the back because his instinct is to control vantage. It does not matter. Vantage is redistributed without permission. He feels the gate's ticks fall silent in the way a metronome halts when a hand holds it. He feels the Crozius's barb melt into a flat line. He feels observed in the only way observation can ennoble rather than humiliate. A question enters him. Not why are you here, but for whom. He answers in the shape of his work, for outcomes, for children not erased by ledger, for the pleasure of being right, for the sin of control. The question removes the last motive, holds it up to light until shame vitrifies into something weight-bearing, then hands it back as discipline. He is shown a picture, not an image, a demand, of the Imperium as triage, 1 billion fires and 1 hose. The hose is held by men who argue in Latin and women who confess in metrics. The bucket is cracked. The floor is uneven. The world is burning in an order no one will admit. He is asked, do you choose one room with perfection or the hallway with adequacy? He chooses hallway. He pays a word for that privilege and does not miss it when it goes. Sinestro meets a will stronger than any ring oath he ever gave. It does not dominate him. It invites him to be as strong as his emblem claims. It warns, fear is not fuel here. It is a solvent. It will strip paint from hearts you want to keep. He understands that this is not a limit. It is a rule set for the survival of his usefulness. Grodd meets an ocean that does not drown. He makes his hand into a bowl, and it is filled to the lip with voices like psalms. He does not lift the bowl to his mouth. He sets it down with 2 hands and bows his head. The silence accepts. Faust feels every unearned syllable fall off his tongue and lie dead at his feet. He is offered a grammar in which his best tricks are profanities, and his discipline is liturgy. He accepts the liturgy because he has always wanted to be applauded by a cathedral that hates him. The cathedral does not applaud. It files him under conditionally useful. Black Manta receives a schematic of another pump, the size of a continent, that keeps the throne's heart from overheating. He falls in love in a way that is not betrayal. He asks nothing. He is told nothing. He prefers it. Cheetah sees a hunt she cannot win. A deer that is also a court that is also a sin that is also a garden. She is told, with kindness made from iron, that the prey here is herself. She considers this as a route. She does not take it. Reverse Flash stares down a long corridor of time that jags. He is told he may never touch this corridor with his hands or feet. He is told that the world beyond the throne is his racetrack. Inside, he is a spectator. He loathes it. He complies. Vey stands in a light that profiles bone. She is shown an index of the times she burned too late and the times she burned too early. The scale never balances. She is given a nail and told to pin that scale to the wall and stop trying to weigh what cannot be weighed. She bleeds in relief. She says nothing audible. Her mouth moves. It is a prayer that sounds like a scab. Raban drops to one knee because the floor stands up and insists. He hears an old friend's quiet. Stand when told. Kneel when needed. Speak only when asked. He smiles under his helm because he can still be surprised by the luxury of obedience. Power scaling. Interlude. 2. Under mandate, fear constructs and telepathy must route through sanctioned channels. Sinestro's ring can shape corridors and shields for evacuation and discipline, not panic amplification. Grodd's suggestions are limited to triage, courage, and calm, with audits by silent sisters and retribution for overreach. Faust is bound by Gersa that abort incantations within 50 meters of civilian congregations or relics. His workable field is cordoned by blackstone tassets he must wear. Reverse Flash is permitted microsecond skews in battlefield lanes, but banned from temporal edits near astropathic choirs, reactors, or command sancta. Lex must submit to periodic null audits, wear a memory-tied tally, visible, and carry a kill cog that will lock the Ouroboros gate if ledger temptation rises. He may deploy drones and math upon matter, never upon minds. All actions occur under the Inquisitor's seal, with custodian override, In extremis. The audience does not end. It ceases. The room resumes having corners. The lintel returns to being pretend. The air allows adjectives again. Lex keeps them small out of gratitude. Acastus waits outside like a statue that thinks. Callista's visor tilts, and he feels pressure and relief at once. "You will be marked," the shield captain says. "Not absolved. The mark is authority and a rope." Lex nods. He does not ask its shape. He will be told. He will wear it where enemies can aim. "Reach Vigilus," the Astropath choir whispers from far away. "Synchronize with a bell that will not admit to having rung. Cut the crown. Starve the sermon. Guard the ledger. Bind the gate." Raban salutes the doors that do not have hinges. Vey closes her eyes and whispers a new oath into her own teeth. "I will count correctly." Holt is not present, but he will feel the tremor in the vox when permission is granted, in a tongue no soldier hears, and every soldier obeys. They exit into midday that pretends to be golden. A storm is forming over the south spires, because storms are always forming. A flight of Zephyrim arcs like scripture. Tech priests pray with wrenches. Cherubs drop wax and are not scolded. In a reliquary colonnade, a woman waits. A canoness prime with a face like a thesis defended before skeptics. She carries a small casket. "The mark," she says, to Vey and the strangers together. "Not a sigil. They would not wear yours. A thing to remind the world where their leash fastens." She opens the casket. Inside, a strip of black metal sits on velvet. It is plain and obscene in a palace of decoration. An aquila, engraved small, nests at one end. A narrow line crosses the strip at thirds. "It is called the tithe the bar," the canoness says. "It signifies debt acknowledged, authority lent, power audited. Wear it over the heart. It will sting when you lie to yourself." Raban takes one for himself first, without hesitation. He does not need it. He wears it anyway. Vey affixes hers. Lex accepts the bar, and the pain under his bracer answers like a cord finally resolving. He pins the bar where his chest plate opens. It stings. He does not blink. Sinestro eyes the strip like a man accepting a single cuff in a tasteful set. He applies it over a knot of will he pretends not to have. Grod weighs it in his palm and expects contempt. He feels relief. He pins it low so children cannot see it and think it is a medal. Faust tries to make a joke. The silent sister looks at him and he mutters, "Yes, mother," in a language he does not acknowledge teaching himself, then fixes the bar to his mantle and feels 3 tricks die like flies. He will not miss them. He will pretend to. Reverse flash pins his bar with a wince. It slows his chest for half a heartbeat. He calls that an insult and an excellent conditioning drill. Manta attaches it to a harness that already carries tools heavier than regret. Cheetah pierces leather and flesh. Blood circles the metal like a crown on a blade. She smiles wolf small. Acastus watches. "Your leash is light until you pull," he says. "Then it bites. Pull if you must. Expect teeth. They do not linger. Mandates spoil if stacked. The convoy assembles in a bay where faith hums at carrier frequency. Engines light. Vox blessings rise. The custodian corvette falls into place like a punctuation mark promising an ending or a warning. As they lift, terror spills away. Parade grounds that have never known victory parades. Barracks that sleep standing. Priests preaching to priests who already agree. The eternity gate holds the world shut. The throne glows under a mountain. The strangers are smaller than insects next to it. They feel larger than they can carry. "Return to Vigilus," Vey says on command vox, voice clean and sharpened by mandate. "We cut the crown. We apply our rope. We do not buy results with other people's souls." Raban transmits to his crusaders, "The Emperor saw us. We will be seen worthy by work. Sinestro flexes will through the band and finds it does not diminish him. It directs him. He dislikes it. He uses it. Grodd breathes in the ship's warm air and tells himself that choosing to be small inside the palace was strength, not survival. Faust angles his eyes away from the sister and forces himself to enjoy the discipline. Manta cradles the idea of a pump that keeps a god alive and suits up like a prayer. Cheetah catalogues prey that is not prey. She adds a page titled Restraint and writes grudgingly that it is a hunt. Lex watches the stars slide. The gate ticks once, politely. The tithe bar stings a fraction and stops. He feels the geometry of the crown in his head lay itself flat like a map at last. He will cut it at the join where obedience refuses and faith carries. He smiles without cruelty. Midway to the jump, the void shimmers. The Auditrix is gone, but something newer, leaner, cleaner tries the door. A Necron ping, almost like a courtesy knock. A Triarch stalker matching vectors, curious about humans marked by the throne. The custodian corvette shifts angle. A spear of light gestures, later. The stalker turns and vanishes without comment. Rulers recognize rulers. They translate to warp. The Geller field hums. The bell does not ring. The Sisters of Silence exist like a line drawn around a secret. The convoy knifes through a sea that hates geometry. Vey sleeps for 10 minutes and dreams of scales nailed to walls and discovers she can rest there. When they fall out of warp, Vigilus rises, scarred, stubborn, older. The crown has grown cleverer in their absence. It has learned to infect roadmaps. It has cut new alleys in the city's mind and pushed cultists through. It waits like a clever saw. The Vox crackles with Holt's voice, a relief like good water. You took your time, he says, which means you made it. Artillery speaks behind him like punctuation. We held. The crown did not enjoy us. Vey smiles without letting it touch more than half her face. We bring a rope, she says. Tie your guns to it. Raben lifts his relic blade, and the new bar flashes like a second oath. Reach the locus, he orders. We cut the crown. The convoy falls into attack paths that look like liturgy now. Sinestro's corridors glow sanctioned and sharp. Grodd's voice rides the Vox at triage volume. Breathe, move, hold the line for your neighbor. Faust's wards snick into place where the sisters permit. Reverse Flash maps timing around choir corners and refuses to touch what he was warned to leave alone. Manta turns water into structure with reverence. The pipes purr. Cheetah stalks cruelty and edits it where edits hold. Lex stands on a broken balcony and draws lines in air that become work, not contracts. He feels the bar sting when his thought strays toward purchase. He corrects. He writes angles. He ties them to people. He pulls. Reach the throne. The astropaths whisper one last time, then go blessedly hoarse. The city breathes. The crown groans. The gate in his head ticks. It does not bite. They move, now not merely as heretics that helped, nor mercenaries useful under watch, but as sanctioned instruments with a leash whose teeth they chose to wear. The rope runs from the palace to their bars to their hands to the crown's throat. It tightens as they run. The sky over Vigilus thinks about bleeding. It will bleed soon. They intend to decide the shape of the wound. The crown's heart sits in a slag field once called Trest Basin. It is a wheel of black stone tilted 5 degrees off honest. Scripture crawls across its facets like ants that learned letters. Around it, word-bearers keep time with blood and drum. Black Legion squads anchor the flanks with discipline that shames the heretic's ecstasy. Holt's guns hammer air where nothing admits to living. Their blast waves break chant lines anyway. Raben's crusaders form the anvil. Sororitas push like a hymn that refuses to end on the wrong word. Sisters of Silence deploy in chevrons. their fields forcing the air to tell the truth. Lex sets his drones in a wedge and builds a moving truss across a geometry that hates trusses. The tithe bar stings. He corrects a thought before it becomes a purchase order. "Hold the east arc," he says. "Manta, flood the bed when I call. Faust, keep your syllables behind the black stone tassets." Sinestro makes corridors with the ring's will bent into sanctioned lanes. They look like nave aisles. Fear flows into discipline, not panic. Grodd threads triage through Vox. Breathe, 2 steps right. Kneel when the shells pass. Stand when the hymn rises. He does not reach for more. He wants to. He does not. Reverse Flash runs approved lanes, cutting seconds into safe slices. He sees the Chronomancer grid in Phantom and rides his migraine like a bridle. Deathstroke and Cheetah ghost the flank. Knives for a throat that thinks it is untouchable. Malphascore stands at the crown's lip, Crozius in hand, scripture smoking. His vox carries like guilt. "You are brave," he tells the city. "You will be mended. You will be made efficient." The Crozius writes a mark in air that tugs at nouns. It reaches for Lex as if the earlier taste made them kin. Vey lifts her rosette. "Bind," she orders, and the nearest silent sisters step, nulls flattening the tug. The mark curls dead as paper. "Push," Raben growls. Templars hit the line with oath-sprung weight. A sister canoness plants her banner and trains her heavy bolter like a prayer that knows recoil. Lex angles light and mass. His drones sing cancellation at the crown's foundation. Black Manta hisses into the Vox. Braces primed. "River at your word." "Hold," Lex says. He needs the crown to lean first. Sinestro's corridor shudders as a demon engine scuttles on furnace legs. Manta spears its guts with a cryobolt and makes it polite. Cheetah skims over wreckage. A quick, clean decision with claws. Deathstroke locates a Vox node choir leader behind a screen of Black Legion shields. 2 rounds, 2 missed syllables in a chant. The choir swallows a breath at the wrong time. The crown's tone falters. Malphas watches Legs through the racket. He smiles like the line on a bill. "You could be free," he calls. Zeroed. Balanced. No more breaking of your favorite words. Lex steps forward onto a slab he made from air and truss. He says nothing. The bar on his chest warms. He makes the crown lean 2 degrees. Black Legion counter-advance. A champion's chain fist whirls, teeth screaming. Raben counters with a cut. That is not pretty. It is correct. The chain fist goes one way, the man goes another. Sororitas flame a trench full of cultists who chose wrong and were loved by the wrong god, who cannot save them from physics. Grodd holds 3 minds steady as shrapnel knits new choices. He says, "Duck." They duck. He does not plant anything else. He is sweating from not being a god. Reverse Flash slaps an afterimage onto a flank, so a Havoc squad will waste a burst on a ghost. He hates himself for liking the trick. He uses it anyway. He gets a sister clear of a blast and does not take a bow. Faust crouches behind a blackstone ward. He lays a snare for a sigil with sand and spit, and a whisper of a word the silent sisters will permit, because it is small and ugly and honest. The sigil steps in it and sticks instead of singing. The crown leans. Now, Lex says. Manta opens sluices he built with explosions and persuasion. A coolant river finds a new bed and races under the crown's tilted teeth. Steam screams. Blackstone pops like glass put in the wrong oven. Malphas slams his Crozius into the lip. The mark he writes bites into geometry. The lean arrests. The river hammers. The lean returns. Raben takes the line up a half pace as if stepping onto a ship's deck in weather and then not falling. Vey moves with him. Inquisitorial guard at her flanks. Rosette out. Sever the preacher. she says on Command Vox, and the sermon. Deathstroke and Cheetah hear it as a green light that glows with their names. They cut left, use a fallen banner as cloth and cover, and approach the crown's rim like moral thieves. Malthus lowers the Crozius to meet them. The motion is lazy. Again, the pain it promises is tidy. Grod, Vey snaps. He's already there, voice slipping under noise. Not that way. This one. 2 steps. Now. Cheetah changes angle mid-sprint as if gravity authorized it. The Crozius slice misses the kill and steals something smaller. The knowledge of a particular shortcut between 2 rooftops in a city she will never see again. She almost stumbles at the loss. She decides it was a poor shortcut anyway. She hits an armored knee and drags the heretic down a degree. Deathstroke's blade takes the Crozius' wrist on the second heartbeat after that. The cut is surgical, not heroic. It is ugly. It works. Malthus's hand remains attached by scripture and stubbornness. He laughs like a man who misbilled a client and got away with it anyway. Sinestro drops a pane between Crozius and Deathstroke. It holds long enough to become history. Faust rips the heat from a melter burst and tosses it at no one. It dies tidy. Reverse Flash drags a sister back from a spike of blackstone like a brother with good reflexes. Lex sees the opening. He puts his hand into a place his instruments say is empty and his instincts say is poisonous. He threads 2 angry lines on his mental graph and ties them to the tithe bar. The bar bites. The crown coughs. The mimetic bite in his nerves lights like a fuse. The world narrows. The noise thins. The crown's heart opens like a courtroom door. It is not a physical chamber. It is opinion given architecture. It is an argument built from stone that hates apologies. Lex falls through the hole, his refusal dug into a room that is not elsewhere. It is exactly here. 3 paths stand before him as if built today and always. On the left, a portal that smells like plywood and coffee and late nights. The world he left. Return. The image flickers with the pleasure of being the smartest man again, where gods wear capes and deals are clean. Behind the door, memory returned, ledger made whole, price. Everything learned here dissolves in the brain like sugar. The good becomes anecdote. The vows blur. He leans back into old wars and forgets names he saved today. He sees the path's kindness. He sees its cruelty. He hates both. On the right, a black corridor with bright instruments of control hanging like saints. Free agent. He sees himself breaking this empire and rebuilding it in arithmetic that loves outcomes more than obedience. The ring of Sinestro's light offers to work for him instead of with him. Grod's voice offers to obey if the rhetoric is good. Faust's smirk becomes a signature. He sees cities saved and souls debited. He sees a schism written with perfect grammar. He sees the corpse of Vey on a step with a neat hole in her doctrine. He sees Raban's blade in his ribs and calls it error. He tastes satisfaction. It is poison. In the center, a narrow stair under a heavy chain. Sanctioned servant. The chain leads up and out and down into everything. The steps are uneven and full of other men's blood. At the top hangs a bar of black metal and an aquila that is not an award. He sees himself smaller than ego wants and larger than fear allows. He sees the gate locked inside him and the holes it ate frozen in place, scar rather than mouth. He sees no credit for his brilliance and outcomes that will quietly happen anyway. He sees a leash around his throat and his hand on the other end, because he tied it. The crown whispers contracts in all 3 directions. It offers signing bonuses and exit clauses. It offers definitions of mercy that would fit on a spreadsheet. It offers to zero out the brand on his arm with a stroke that will be reflected by charges to people he will never meet. Deliberation is not dramatic. It is arithmetic done in the light of blood. Out beyond this room, Holt's guns hesitate over coordinates that make sense to his teeth. He fires anyway, because the math survives. Vey holds a sister back from rushing. Mercy delayed, not denied. Raben shifts a step and takes a blow that should have taken a novice's head. Sinestro holds a corridor when he wants to make an edifice. Grodd says breathe to a man who wants to die for nothing and keeps him alive long enough to die for something later. Manta braces a gate that wants to be heroic and collapse. He chooses unromantic function. Reverse Flash waits 1 entire second because a choir is finishing a note. Cheetah kills a cruel man and spares a frightened one because they are not the same animal. Deathstroke cuts a rope that holds a bell that would have crushed 30. Everybody pays their price in small coins. Lex chooses. He steps onto the narrow stair. The leash rises. The bar on his chest burns like a signature made with a nail. He takes the chain into his hand and knots it into the gate that brought him here. The Ouroboros ticks, bites, and then stops like a clock held by a father's hand and told it is night now. The Crozius barb in his nerve screams and dissolves like a bad line item deleted and corrected. Some memory does not return. A hole remains, scarred clean. He accepts the scar. The crown heaves. The geometry groans. Malthus cries out as if his pen blotched across a word he loved. Lex opens his eyes in the same second he closed them. He is still in the basin. The bar on his chest glows dull red, then cools. Now, he says, and his voice is smaller than thunder and louder than clever. Manta floods the bed. Blackstone cracks and runs like pitch. Sinestro slams sanctioned braces under a facet and tips it toward collapse. Faust lays a lattice that even a sister allows because it is made from temperature and duty. Grodd holds 1,000 minds away from the noise so they can act, not panic. Reverse Flash hauls 6 wounded out of the new gully and refuses a 7th because the line says no, and the line is this world's law. Cheetah and Deathstroke keep Malthus from writing on anyone who bleeds honestly. Raben and Vey push. Malthus returns to Lex like a greedy paragraph. His Crozius is whole again by faith. He brings it down. It will steal more words and turn cleverness to compliance if it touches. The silent sisters step as one. Their field lashes like a refusal. The Crozius hits air that refuses to carry poem. The head of the relic cracks. Sound is math-breaking. Malthus staggers. Vey is on him like sentence. Raben's blade rises like a period. Confess, Vey says, giving him the one mercy that applies. His smile returns, not as a weapon, now as a habit. I am obedient, he says, and the claim is worship and lie. Raben answers with a cut that is also a rite. Malthus' Cor's head falls into water that has no liturgy for this. His body takes a step, remembers it is dead, and kneels. The crown screams once, then remembers its facets are broken and goes to sleep the way an argument does when its author is gone. Black Legion teams fall back like good soldiers. They cut lanes of fire and do not indulge in theatrics. They take wounded. They leave promises. They are not beaten. They are done today. Holt calls ceasefire on 3 channels at once. 2 obey. The 3rd is orcs. They only stop because the wall is boring again. Drukhari knives snag nothing and drift off to bleed somewhere prettier. The Eldar ribbon appears for a breath over an alley, glows, and is gone without thanks. High overhead, a Necron unit audits the broken Blackstone and does not interfere, as if noting, your mess does not offend us now. Sanitation begins. It looks like sisters laying out cloth. It looks like Templars stacking heretic bodies in neat lines that deny their theology a narrative. It looks like Cadians blessing ammo and unloading crates and pulling survivors into new families of necessity. It looks like Manta shutting sluices and tapping pipes like shoulders. It looks like Grodd telling a child to count to 4 and then higher because there will be breath to spend. It looks like Sinestro dimming his ring without being asked. It looks like Reverse Flash standing still for 8 seconds. It looks like Faust cleaning up his own chalk with a wetted thumb. Vey walks to Lex through steam and ash. The tithe bar on her armor looks heavier than metal. She stops close enough to see the brand under his bracer not as a wound, but as a notch in a tool. Path, she says, not a question. Leash, he answers, which is acceptance. She studies his face, not soft, not cruel, weight-bearing. She nods once. Boundaries clause, she says formal. You will not enthrall. You will not bargain with ledger demons, dark machinists, or prayer that audits. You will submit to null audits per schedule. You will minimize collateral with bias toward the living, especially the unarmed. When your cleverness and mercy conflict, you will bring me the problem, not the fait accompli. He holds her eyes. When we must choose between 30 now and 100 later, he says, I will bring you the arithmetic before I spend anyone. When the battle denies time, I will fall on doctrine that saves the most who have futures. You may kill me after if I am wrong. Accepted, she says. She lifts a phial. It contains water taken from a font on Ophelia, mixed with coolant from a god pump on Terra, salted with tears from Vigulus. She flicks it against his brow. Sanction held. Raven steps up. Relic blade on his shoulder. Visor cracked and bright. Your emblem, he says to Lex, not mocking. Make it admit its duty. Lex glances at his chest plate where an Aquila-shaped absence once lived. He runs a fingertip through ash and oil and draws a thin, exact line through the gap. A geometric L nested inside a small Aquila filigree, not proud, not hidden. He does not say brand. He says, mark. Raban nods. Work, he says, not words. The transformation is not magical. It is visible. Lex's armor loses some angles that read as contempt and gains edges that read as responsibility. The tithe bar sits clean against it. The Ouroboros inside him is quiet inside the leash he tied himself. His eyes look like a man who has slept on stone and chosen it. Sinestro watches with a professional's interest in uniforms. His ring flickers at the mark and returns no mockery. Fear is not ashamed to be channeled when a symbol directs it. He lifts his chin a fraction and plans corridors that teach. Grodd rolls his shoulders like a wrestler before re-entering a ring. He knows the leash around this team is safer than his hands on a switch. He grins without teeth at a child who counts to 7 and forgets to be afraid of the 8th. That is a victory this world understands. Reverse Flash wipes his mouth and decides he will be the fastest man alive to stop when a choir sings. He catalogues that in muscles, not words. Cheetah dips 2 fingers into the basin and draws a line under one eye like war paint. It is not a vow. It is a reminder. Kill cruelty, not fear. Manta shuts his valves and arranges his explosives like rosary beads he will never admit to owning. He strokes a pipe and promises it not to be heroic again until someone asks nicely. Faust ties his tassets tighter. He whispers an ugly little binding on his own tongue that knocks out any syllable that smells like pride within 50 paces of relics. He hates it. He keeps it. Holt walks the line and sees more faces than names on today's sheet. He is not a poet. He does not thank anyone aloud beyond the necessary. He writes, lives saved, and means it more than the number. They gather in the Manufactorum Chapel once more, air hot with solvent and nervous quiet. Vey unseals a new reliquary. Inside, the crozier's head lies cracked. Blackstone shards hum low. Script is ash where Robin's cut told truth. Vey seals it again. Forbidden archive, she tells the servo skulls. Burn the catalogue. Keep the object. Raban stands with them but half turned toward doors. He belongs most where pages end in blade marks. We have a mandate, he says formal. It weighs. We carry. Lex inclines his head. We build a protocol, he says. Evac corridors by Ring. Triage Vox by Grod. Water by Manta. Cuts by Slade. Edits by Cheetah. Wards by Faust. Math by me. Oversight by Vey. Sword by you. Faith by the people, Holt adds, as if reminding the room who pays last and most. Faith by the people, Vey repeats, and the echo is an order. They step out into a city that is not healed, only reprieved. That is this world's miracle. Reprieve. It is not cheap. It is enough. The work blooms outward. The crown is gone. The crater holds only steam and a line of sisters who pray without waiting for applause. Orcs pound a gate and slouch away when the wall refuses to enjoy the attention. Drukhari pluck a few cowards and vanish like wasps embarrassed by rain. Eldar's Shadow Theatre unfolds a bridge over a new chasm and declines credit with exquisite arrogance. Necrons scoop black grit into neat pyramids, label them, and leave without comment, like custodians. In orbit, the custodian corvette turns broadside to a Necron vessel that pretends it planned to be elsewhere. They salute each other with absence and drift apart. At Saturn, something old pretends not to be amused. At street level, a child raises a hand to the last faint glowing pane of a corridor. It dissolves on his palm like warm frost. He laughs once, solemn and careful. His mother whispers thank you to nobody and somebody. Grod hears it and declines to put his name on it. It belongs to the street. Night falls. It does not bleed. It holds steady. They sleep ragged and sideways. Some stand at doors and call it sleep. Some dream. Lex does not dream. He audits himself in stillness. The silent sister's palm-shaped absence pressed against that part of his mind that wants to add. He falls into a half-sleep when he accepts the limit and wakes with an idea that does not buy souls. He writes it down. Morning pulls itself up by prayer. Holt assigns work. Raban sharpens the edge that did not dull. Vey signs sanction renewals and citations and 3 death warrants punctuated by a sigh no one hears. The strangers stand in line to present their bars and receive their audits like professional sinners who discovered a use for shame. The vision of 3 paths does not return. It does not need to. The path chosen repeats itself in small steps. News spreads strange. A Vox canticle in a Habspire mentions Xenos auxiliaries under leash, performing sanctioned salvage of souls. A scribal order at Ophelia files a note. Case, Vigilus Crown, outcome favorable, unusual instruments, tithe bar program extended. A War Master's adjutant marks down resources, non-imperial problem solvers, leash-proofed, dangerous, effective, caution. On a dead world 3 jumps away, a dark Mechanicum priest hears the bell in his code and smiles thin as wire. He writes a new auditrix that will not be so easily wrung out. It will invoice war. In the eye, something with many names and one desire squints through a crack left by the crown's death and decides it has a grudge against math that learned manners. In Comora, a homunculus sketches the gorilla's skull with curiosity and decides to collect that emotion someday and bottle it. On a craft world, a shadow seer draws 3 paths in dust and wipes away 2 without gloating. They chose the rope, she tells nobody who agrees. It will burn their hands. Good. On a tomb world, a Triarch Praetorian adds Luthor, restrained optimization under leash, to a list titled Annoyances that extend stability. Tolerate. In the bowels of Vigilus, Orcs retell the story as a joke, where the punchline is, "Then they brought a bigger chain," and everybody thinks it's hilarious, because it is true. Epilogue. They stand on a balcony that used to overlook a coolant dump, and now looks over a square with a fountain blackened and still beautiful. The square is full of patience and prayers and carts and coffee. It is a city on purpose again, not merely under siege. Holt leans on the rail and points with his chin, as if that saves him lifting an arm that aches. "You're staying," he says to Lex. "Not a question." "For a term," Lex says. "We have to make this portable. Protocol, not personality." Vay joins them, eyes tired, mouth not. "I will write it as a writ," she says. "Sanctioned auxilia. 1 Luthor cell. 8 instruments bound by bar and audit. Deployable under inquisitorial seal. Revocable by custodian sign. They will hate it. It will save worlds." Raban sets his gauntlet on the rail. The paint flakes like old confession. "We will watch," he says. "We will help. We will end you if you become what you would have been on the right-hand path." Lex nods. He does not say thank you. He does not need to. The leash between them is gratitude, written as law. Sinestro hovers, low, ring quiet. He watches an evacuation lane work without his light for the first time. He approves. He plans new lanes. He will build cathedrals in his head and then sand them down to corridors outside it. He smiles like a man who found a better exercise than lifting his own ego. Grodd sits on the steps with 3 children and teaches them to breathe like soldiers. A mother watches and does not flinch. He tells himself it is rhetoric practice. He knows it is better than winning arguments. Reverse Flash paces the edge of the square like a boundary rope. He times doors. He times prayers. He starts to like patience the way athletes like ice baths, as discipline that hurts and makes them better. Cheetah perches on a gargoyle and tracks petty theft. When the thief goes for bread, she redirects the hand and swaps a coin she took from a dead man's pocket. She is not kind. She is precise. She calls it restraint. It tastes like new meat to a hunter. She purrs without sound. Black Manta listens to water knock quietly inside a pipe that was once a scream. He smiles where no one can see it and scribbles a plan to build surge tanks that will pretend to be altars so the city will love them enough to keep them working. Faust packs his tassets and curses fondly at the bruise the bar leaves. He writes a small book of permitted tricks titled Ugly and Good. He does not show it to anyone. He quotes from it when nobody asks. A gust swirls grit, prayer smoke, and the smell of fried starch. The tithe bar stings one last time today and cools. Lex looks up. In the high, broken sky, there is no bleeding. There is weather. He enjoys the fact. Somewhere above, in halls where bells ring without human hands, a clerk writes sanctioned servant protocol. Initial success on Vigilus. Observe for mission creep. Remind them to count correctly. The ink is iron. The signature is a nail. The file goes into a box labeled Unlikely Friends of the Throne. A boy in the square raises a wooden aquila he carved himself. It is crooked and perfect. He asks a gorilla to hold the other end while he ties a string. Grodd obliges. The string breaks twice. They tie it again. It holds. Holt clears his throat. Back to work, he says to everyone and no one. The square answers by being busy. That is compliance and worship in this city. Lex turns from the view. The mark on his chest is small and true. The hole in his memory does not ache. The gate is quiet under leash. He is not absolved. He is obliged. It suits him. He heads for the next problem.